Chapter 8:14. Gu Yinran stood in her apartment and looked at the mess. She took 2 deep breaths to calm herself down. Then, she carefully recalled the advice the person on the phone had given her. She was worried that she couldn't remember when she called, so she suggested writing it down with a pen or recording it on her phone. However, the person on the phone was very cautious and warned her that it was safest to remember it in her head. Whether it was written with a pen or recorded on her phone or on her computer, it would leave traces. And once these traces were left, it would be discovered by others. In the end, the person repeatedly reminded her that she was in the Wuxia Empire, not abroad. She must never underestimate the capabilities of those people here, especially Gu Nianji's boyfriend, Hu Xiaoheng. However, when Gu Yinran casually told the person that Hu Xiaoheng had broken up with Gu Nianji, the person was not happy. Instead, she was dumbfounded. After a long pause, she said, "Don't contact me again?" Then she hung up in a hurry. Gu Yinran thought she had disconnected, so she quickly called again to explain and ask why she couldn't contact her again. But this time she could no longer hear the sound of the phone ringing. All she heard was, "The number you have dialed does not exist. Please dial the full number. Thank you for your cooperation." Gu Yinran's heart sank. It seemed like the person had really cut off the connection between them. She had also suspected this number before because it wasn't a valid number at all. She had checked all the yellow books in the world, but there was no international number that only dialed a 4-digit number. When she first dialed the number, she had her suspicions. However, when the call connected, she was relieved. But now she couldn't get through to the number anymore. In this life, only after she became good friends with this person 4 years ago, did her life truly flourish. Unfortunately, it was only for 4 years. In the future, she could only rely on herself. Gu Yinran closed her eyes and went over her plan again and again in her mind. She only opened her eyes and walked to the bathroom when she was sure that every detail had been done according to the person's requirements. Gu Yinran went to the bathroom and looked at her increasingly beautiful face in the mirror. Suddenly, she raised her hand and slapped herself hard until half of her face was swollen. Gu Yinran woke up before dawn the next day. Lifting the blankets, she looked at her body. The red marks from yesterday had already turned purple. Very good. She hurriedly got up and went to the bathroom. When she saw her face in the mirror was still swollen and deformed, she smiled slightly. His smile affected the swollen half of his face, making him look somewhat ferocious. After breakfast, Gu Yinran waited for a while. When it was 7 o'clock, she covered her face with an exaggeratedly glaring Hermes blue and purple scarf. She put on an oversized cashmere sweater, cashmere skinny pants, flats, and a large flat jade bracelet on her wrist. She didn't put on any makeup, took the transparent folder she had prepared the night before, and left the house just like that. She drove around Imperial Capital as if she was looking for her way. After an hour, she finally arrived at the office building of Yixian's new company at 8 o'clock. Yixian's new company made antivirus software. The company was called Virtual Vaccine, which meant that his company would be the nemesis of all computer viruses. There was no computer virus that his company couldn't cure. This company was located in the high-tech park in the 4th Ring Road of Imperial Capital. There were many similar small and medium-sized internet and software companies there, as well as one of the top 3 internet giants in the country, Chengdu Search. This high-tech park wasn't far from the B University campus. Gu Yinran thought of this and smirked. Yixian's company rented the 17th and 18th floors of this office building. This was the time when the employees of all the major companies in the office building were going to work. An endless stream of men and women walked in through the main doors and into the elevators. Putting on her Prada floating cloud sunglasses, Gu Yinran walked to the lobby of Yixian's company with great elegance. She politely said to the receptionist on the first floor, "Hello, my name is Gu Yinran. I'm here to see the boss of Virtual Vaccine, Mr. Yi." This company was newly opened by Yixian. Gu Yinran had never been here before, and Yixian didn't have the habit of exaggerating his private life in front of others. Therefore, no one there recognized her. The receptionist thought Gu Yinran was here for business, so she quickly asked, "May I ask if you have an appointment?" Gu Yinran took off her sunglasses and smiled at the receptionist. Her voice was gentle. "No. But I'm very familiar with Mr. Yi. When he left my house this morning, he forgot a document, so I brought it to him." As she spoke, Gu Yinran raised her hand to show the receptionist the translucent folder in her hand. "That young and talented Mr. Yi left her house this morning?" The receptionist's eyes widened. Based on Gu Yinran's seemingly vague words, she instantly imagined many erotic scenes. Her attitude immediately became respectful. "Please wait for a moment. I'll call Mr. Ye's office." The internal line quickly reached Yi Xian's secretary. He had worked for Yi Xian for a few years and had some understanding of his private life. He vaguely knew that Yi Xian had a longtime girlfriend named Gu Yanran. "Is this Miss Gu? Ask her to wait for a moment. I'll go ask Mr. Yi." The secretary knocked on Yi Xian's office door. "Mr. Yi, there's a Miss Gu Yanran downstairs. She wants to see you." Yi Xian didn't expect Gu Yanran to actually find her way here. He frowned but didn't make things difficult for her. "Let her come up." The secretary confirmed Gu Yanran's status and quickly returned the call to the receptionist on the first floor. "Please ask Miss Gu to come up." Yi Xian's secretary was already so respectful, so the receptionist was even more so. She practically sent Gu Yanran to the elevator and personally pressed the button for the 8th floor for her. When Gu Yanran arrived at the door of Yi Xian's company on the 8th floor, she saw that the cubicles there were already full of people. Everyone came to work so early. With an indescribable sense of superiority, Gu Yanran gracefully walked across the lobby to Yi Xian's CO office. Yi Xian was the boss, so his office was the largest and most luxurious room on the entire 18th floor. The side facing the lobby was an entire glass wall. The people on the inside could clearly see the outside, and the people on the outside could also clearly see the inside. The culture of high-tech companies was more open and lively. The boss was willing to get along with the employees, so the concept of class wasn't as strong as in traditional companies. Gu Yanran walked over and took off her sunglasses to slightly acknowledge the people who looked up at her. The employees in Yi Xian's company were originally curious, but when they saw the obvious swollen marks on Gu Yanran's face, they were a bit shocked. Gu Yanran didn't care at all. She just walked to Yi Xian's office and knocked on the door. "Come in. The door isn't closed." Yi Xian's clear voice came from inside. Gu Yanran smiled and opened the door to enter. Yi Xian's office was like a transparent fish tank. Both the north and south sides were transparent glass walls. Looking out from the glass wall on the south side, one could see the entire high-tech park at a glance. Gu Yanran gently closed the door but skillfully left a small gap. The door wasn't closed tightly. But from Yi Xian's angle he couldn't see it at all. In reality he was very displeased with Gu Yanran's sneaky actions and said disapprovingly, "Why did you close the door?" Now that things had come to this, was there anything between them that couldn't be said to others? Anyway, everyone knew. As soon as he thought about Gu Nianji calling him Gu Yanran's little wolf dog, Yi Xian was a bit upset. Gu Yanran smiled at him, revealing 8 snow-white teeth. Yi Xian had never been able to resist her smile. When she saw that Yi Xian had indeed looked away, Gu Yanran's smile became even sweeter. She walked over to Yi Xian and said, "Xian, it was my fault last night. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." As she spoke, she even bowed to him. Yi Xian froze and put down the mouse. He clasped his hands together on the desk and frowned. "What do you mean? I was wrong. I was really wrong. I beg you, don't force me anymore, okay? Do you know what a father means to me?" Gu Yanran's tears came without warning. They rolled down her cheeks as she cried in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at her in shock and couldn't help but take a tissue from the desk for her. "Why are you crying? As long as you keep your word and don't make things difficult for Gu Nianji, what can I force you to do?" Gu Yanran took the tissue to wipe her nose and cried even louder. "Yi Xian, you have no conscience. I've been with you for so many years. I've given you everything and you're still not satisfied. Do you have to force me? Don't you want the inventory of the Gu family's assets? I'll give it to you." As she spoke, she threw the transparent folder at Yi Xian. He didn't know if it was because the documents inside hadn't been properly placed, but when she threw it, the white A4 paper inside flew out and scattered all over the floor. Yi Xian thought about the years he'd spent with Gu Yanran had been very sweet. He couldn't help but say sadly, "As long as you agree to the conditions I mentioned yesterday, I can let bygones be bygones." Gu Yanran heard that and cried even harder. Her voice traveled through the crack in the door to the lobby outside. "Yi Xian, I'll tell you, okay? Didn't you and Gu Nianji just want to know if my father had a will? Don't force me anymore. I can't take it anymore. I'll tell you, okay? My father's lawyer, Mr. Vanderbilt, is in Little Rock, Utah. Go look for him. See if there's anything you want. I've had enough. My father is still alive. He's alive. I'm not as heartless as you and Gu Nianji. My father is still alive, yet you want to carry out his will. You've gone too far." As she spoke, Gu Yanran turned around, opened the door to Yi Xian's office and ran out in tears. The employees in Yi Xian's office all craned their necks to listen to the gossip. A few people near Yi Xian's office even turned on their phones and began to secretly record it. Yi Xian originally thought that Gu Yanran had changed her mind and wouldn't make things difficult for Gu Yanji anymore. He didn't expect her to still be stubborn. His expression turned ugly and he angrily slammed his desk. "You're on your own. Don't let me see you again." Gu Yanran ran out of Yi Xian's office in tears. As soon as she reached the lobby on the first floor, she moaned and fainted in front of the elevator. The people waiting for the elevator at the door panicked, and everyone quickly called an ambulance to take Gu Yanran up. When the doctor in the ambulance gave Gu Yanran first aid, he unbuttoned her shirt and was shocked to find many bruises on her neck and arms. "This is the first watch. Cover the pot and say it's still the second watch today. It'll be the third watch tomorrow. My friends are anxious. My friends must also remember to vote for me every day. The second watch at 7 p.m. Chapter 8:15. What happened? Doctor? Should we give her a full-body checkup? The nurse in the ambulance asked quietly. Send her to the hospital first. We'll see when she wakes up. The doctor couldn't decide since it involved the patient's privacy. Also, the patient fainting had nothing to do with her injuries. It was entirely due to the lack of oxygen. The doctor put an oxygen mask on Gu Yanran with a dark expression. The ambulance arrived at the hospital. Gu Yanran woke up as soon as she arrived, but she was still very weak. She only cried and didn't speak. She didn't allow anyone to touch her. The doctor and nurses saw that she was emotionally unstable and had injuries. They had no choice but to let her stay for observation. Gu Yanran called her housekeeper Mrs. James, and she immediately brought the necessary things to take care of Gu Yanran. She moved her to a special single room and found the best doctor and nurses to take care of her. The doctor saw that she was emotionally stable and asked carefully, "Miss Gu, you have some injuries on your body. We're worried that they might be related to your sudden fainting. Should we check?" Gu Yanran shook her head frantically. No need to check. I'm fine. I just need to stay here for a few days." Okay. If you need, we can." Before the doctor could finish, he noticed that Gu Yanran had fainted again. This time Mrs. James was there so she could help Gu Yanran. She signed the consent form and allowed the doctor to check Gu Yanran's body. The results made the doctor and nurses furious. "Miss Gu was abused. Mrs. James, do you know who did it?" The doctor asked angrily. "Who would be so crazy?" Mrs. James immediately thought of Yi Xian, who often spent the night with Gu Yanran. However, she also knew that Yi Xian and Gu Yanran had a special relationship. Although they seemed to have fallen out because Gu Yanran had slept with another man, who knew what young couples were thinking? What if it was just a trick? She said cautiously, "This is the master's personal matter. I need to ask the master before I can answer you." She spoke British English and was reserved with a hint of arrogance, but her etiquette was impeccable. The doctor also understood English and didn't say anything else. However, after leaving Gu Yanran's single room, he called the police according to protocol. According to the Wuxia Empire's laws, when gunshot or knife wounds were found as well as injuries to women and children, the hospital doctors were obligated to call the police. In the afternoon, the police station sent 2 female officers to the hospital to investigate Gu Yanran's injuries. When Gu Yanran heard that the police had arrived, she immediately became alert. She wrapped herself up tightly and sat on the bed, denying that she had been abused or abused. She just said, "It's nothing. I was careless. My skin is too soft and the slightest touch will cause bruises. No one hurt me. Please do not disturb me. I'm recuperating." The 2 policewomen were also very good-tempered. They had seen many victims of such relationships. These women were generally very timid. Even if they were abused by men for a long time, they would not dare to say a word, let alone call the police to protect their rights. Therefore, they patiently stayed at the hospital to talk to Gu Yanran and take care of her. They tried to dispel the knot in her heart and cooperate with their investigation. However, Gu Yanran gritted her teeth and refused to say who did it. She insisted that she did it herself. At night, after the 2 policewomen left, Mrs. James asked Gu Yanran worriedly, "Miss Gu, why did you hide it for him?" "Who are you talking about?" Gu Yanran frowned. From the corner of her eye, she noticed that the door to the room was slightly open. It seemed like someone was standing in front of the room. "Of course it's Yi Xian. Is he still fighting because of you and someone else? Actually, if I had to say, unmarried men and women are free to choose. Why does he need you to be loyal to him? Does he deserve it?" Mrs. James's attitude was very dismissive when she talked about Yi Xian. Yes, she looked down on Yi Xian and felt that he was like a prostitute. He was only Gu Yanran's boy toy. However, Gu Yanran shook her head and said sadly, "Don't say that. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have wanted to break up with him. As she spoke, she began to cry again. That night, Gu Yanran pinched herself all over again. Especially on top of the old wounds, she added new ones. The next day, when the doctor came to check on her, he discovered that her old wounds had not healed, but new ones had appeared. His expression changed. What exactly is going on? Gu Yanran smiled good-naturedly, but tears streamed down her cheeks. I told you. Actually, I accidentally did it myself. There was no one else. I don't blame anyone. The doctor immediately understood what she meant and couldn't help feeling sorry for her. Miss Gu, is that B*TCH really that worthy of your protection? Even willing to harm herself to cover up the old wounds. Gu Yanran didn't say anything else. Biting her lip, she turned away and wiped her tears with the back of her hand. When the two female police officers arrived, they learned about Gu Yanran's actions from the doctor. They were very sorry and said, "This is really terrible. By doing this, when the forensic examiner examines the wounds, the old wounds can't be examined at all. The new wounds will only have her own finger marks, so it will be very difficult to accuse the person who actually hurt her." Examining wounds was the job of the forensic examiner. It required professional equipment and techniques. Normal doctors could only look at the extent of the injury and couldn't examine the scars. So when Gu Yanran found out that the forensic examiner couldn't examine the old wounds, she looked relieved and said to the two female police officers, "Thank you for helping me. I will remember your kindness." The two female police officers looked at each other and shook their heads in unison. She was clearly being abused, yet she was wholeheartedly protecting that man. But this man was clearly a cruel and unscrupulous beast. Gu Yanran had been hospitalized for a few days, but he hadn't come to see her even once. It seemed like it didn't matter if one was rich or poor, as long as they were weak, they would be bullied. It was this kind of weak woman that made those despicable men more and more fearless. Since they couldn't find any evidence, and Gu Yanran didn't want to accuse anyone, the police couldn't do anything but write a report for her to sign and leave. Since they couldn't find any evidence and Gu Yanran refused to press charges, the police had no choice but to write a report for her to sign and leave. She refused to return to the apartment in the 3rd Ring Road of the imperial capital and ordered someone to put the apartment up for sale on the real estate market. She refused to return to the apartment in the 3rd Ring Road of the imperial capital and ordered someone to put the apartment up for sale on the real estate market. Ever since Yi Xian found out that Gu Xiangwen's family lawyer was originally in Little Rock Canyon, Utah, he had been feeling uneasy and wanted to see him personally. He wasn't sure if the lawyer was really Gu Xiangwen's lawyer or if Gu Yanran was lying to him. Yi Xian carefully looked at the inventory of the Gus assets that Gu Yanran had thrown at him that day and realized that it only contained 1/3 of the assets that he knew. The other 2/3, where did they go? The more Yi Xian thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong. But he was also very busy at the company, so he couldn't just leave like that. So he delayed it for 2 to 3 days and arranged everything at the company. Before boarding the plane, he called Gun Yanji and said, "Gun Yanji, I'm going to the United States to see someone. Wait for my news." If this lawyer was really Gu Xiangwen's family lawyer, then he must have Gu Xiangwen's will. As long as there was a will, Gun Yanji's problem would be easily solved. Gu Yanran couldn't argue even if she wanted to. Gun Yanji was writing her thesis in the library when she received Yi Xian's call. She walked out to the hallway to answer the call and asked with concern, "Who are you going to see in the United States?" "I can't say for now. I'm not sure if it's true." Yi Xian hesitated. He didn't want to say too much and cause Gun Yanji to dislike Gu Yanran even more. They were sisters after all. Although they weren't biological sisters, they were still sisters. Gun Yanji was very unhappy with Yi Xian's hesitation. Her voice also softened. "Fine, then, be careful. I'm hanging up." She turned off the phone and continued to write her thesis. Yi Xian also put the phone away and looked around. He realized that the few people who had been following him a few days ago seemed to have disappeared. He snorted and walked through the VIP special passage to get on the plane. He didn't say anything on the way and arrived alone in Little Rock Canyon, Utah. At the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces in the Imperial Capital, Bai Yueran came to Hua Xiaoheng's office. She placed a few citizen complaints in front of Hua Xiaoheng and said, "Hua Xiao, tell our people to restrain themselves. This is within the country, not abroad. They can't use the methods they use against foreigners on their own citizens. Stalking, monitoring, and secretly recording, these methods were used for national interests overseas, so there was no problem at all. However, within the country, if the citizens found out, it would be big trouble. Also, according to the legislation, The scope of the Special Operations Forces operations should also be outside the country. They shouldn't be operating within the country. However, Hua Xiaoheng used the previous time he went to New York to encounter danger and catch a mole to use both carrot and stick to force the Senate to pass new legislation that allowed the Special Operations Forces to act freely within the country after receiving permission from the Supreme Military Council and the Senate's Special Panel. However, this freedom required a lot of authorization. This way, the possibility of keeping it a secret would be greatly reduced. Therefore, Hua Xiaoheng normally didn't act within the country. There was no other reason than it was too easy for secrets to be leaked. This time, in order to smoothly proceed with the estate dispute between Gu Nianji and Gu Yanran, he made an exception and used the excuse that Gu Xiangwen's assets involved important national interests to apply for special permission from the Senate and the Supreme Military Council to monitor Gu Yanran. However, Gu Yanran seemed to be doing something again this time. She first fell out with Yi Xian and sent him away. At the same time, for some reason, she actually discovered that someone was stalking her and specifically complained to the Senate about the Special Operations Forces. She even hinted that Hua Xiaoheng was abusing his power for personal gain, by using his own power to help Gu Nianji fight for the estate. The complaint document in Bai Yueran's hands was submitted by Gu Yanran. She had already fallen out with Gu Nianji, so she wasn't afraid of offending her or Hua Xiaoheng. Therefore, even though she knew that Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng had broken up, she still followed that person's suggestion and filed a complaint. This way, Hua Xiaoheng would have some reservations and not secretly help Gu Nianji because he still had feelings for her. Hua Xiaoheng flipped open the complaint document in front of him. His eyes flashed as he said, "A real name complaint? But Gu Yanran is not a Huaxia citizen. Even if we monitor her, it's not against the law, right?" Bai Yueran smiled and nodded. "I told the Secret Service the same thing, but they still insisted that this is within the Huaxia Empire. In terms of territory, we can't overstep our boundaries. Even if we want to monitor Gu Yanran, they have to do it." Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. "I've already received permission from the Senate to act. If they're dissatisfied, they can look for Speaker Long." Hua Xiaoheng finished speaking and pushed the complaint documents back to Bai Yueran. "I'll have to trouble Director Bai with the rest. Okay, I finally understand why our people are so domineering. So it's because, if the higher-ups like it, the people below will like it even more." Bai Yueran smiled as she took back the documents. "Since Hua Xiaoheng is so domineering, I won't embarrass him. Wait for me to respond to their inquiries." However, Bai Yueran changed the topic. "Hua Xiaoheng, you better withdraw the people monitoring Gu Yanran." "Why?" Hua Xiaoheng didn't even look up. He didn't want to continue this topic. "I'm talking to you about this as a lawyer." Bai Yueran's expression became serious. "If your surveillance hadn't been discovered by Gu Yanran, then it wouldn't have mattered. But now that your surveillance has been discovered by Gu Yanran, I'm afraid that when the time comes in court, Gu Yanran will use this as an excuse to claim that a lot of the evidence was obtained illegally and not allowed to be used in court. This will have an extremely negative impact on Gu Nianji's estate dispute case." This was the second watch. Cover the pot and say it's still the second watch today. Tomorrow will be the third watch. Dear friends, remember to vote for me every day. Good night, dear friends. Chapter 8:16. After Bai Yueran left, Hua Xiaoheng sat alone in his office and thought about it for a long time as he stared at the blue screen of the computer. Bai Yueran's words made sense. He had obtained authorization from the military and the Senate to monitor the cabinet. He had also taken advantage of the fact that Gu Xiangwen's patent involved national interests to monitor Gu Yanran. Later, because Yi Xian had taken out the inventory of the Gu family's assets, he had also monitored Yi Xian. But from a legal perspective, monitoring a public authority like the cabinet was a completely different concept from monitoring ordinary citizens like Gu Yanran and Yi Xian. Why did the Snowden incident in the United States cause such a ruckus and cause the US government to be disgraced? It wasn't because it monitored government officials, but because it indiscriminately monitored ordinary American citizens. This was a heinous violation of personal privacy in modern society. Although the United States had its own Patriot Act to protect its surveillance, in reality, it also knew it was untenable, so it never dared to make it public. As everyone knew, after this incident was publicized by Snowden, it was immediately condemned by the world's public opinion. No one considered whether this kind of behavior was legal or not, and the political impact it had on the US government was extremely negative. Moreover, in modern society, whether it was legal or not was a relative concept. The legislature could create many unimaginable laws at any time, and they could also abolish many laws that were taken for granted at any time. And for high-ranking officials like him, other than the law, they also had to consider the influence on the citizens, especially the political influence on the Special Operations Forces. He would never forget that when the Special Operations Forces was established, the Senate, the Cabinet, and the military's upper echelons were very suspicious of one thing. Would they expand their scope of operations into the country if they had too much power? And had he indeed invested inappropriate attention into Gu Nianji's case? If Gu Yanran knew about these actions, there was no doubt that it would cause an unexpected blow to Gu Nianji in court. The entire estate dispute case might even be twisted into the Wuxia Empire's military attempting to use public power to seize the private assets of foreigners. If that happened, Gu Nianji would have no chance of winning at all. And it would push the behind-the-scenes organization, the Special Operations Forces, to the forefront. No matter which aspect it was something he couldn't bear. He couldn't let the credibility of the Special Operations Forces he had established suffer a fatal blow, but he also couldn't let Gu Nianji suffer in silence. After thinking about it, Hua Xiaoheng only had one conclusion. Gu Yanran had a master behind her, and this master was very familiar with the Wuxia Empire's way of doing things. He stared ahead expressionlessly, fiddling with a round gold coin in his hand. Suddenly, he slammed the gold coin onto the table and pocketed it with his fingers. Picking up the internal line, he issued a series of commands to cancel all surveillance of Gu Yanran and Yi Xian's movements. Then he stood up from behind his desk and grabbed the navy blue casual coat on the coat rack. With a shake of his arms, he put it on over his shirt and strode out of the office. After getting into the car, Hua Xiaoheng drove directly to the second-hand house that Gu Nianji had bought in Hepingli on the 4th Ring Road. As he opened the door with the key card, he texted Gu Nianji, "Come to the new house in Hepingli. I have important matters to discuss." He rarely texted Gu Nianji, but this time, in order to be cautious, he texted her. Gu Nianji had just walked out of the classroom when she saw Hua Xiaoheng's text. She had 2 classes in the morning which she had just finished. She had to go to the library to catch up on her homework. She hesitated for a second when she saw the text, but she still called back. Hua Xiaoheng was sitting on the deck chair on the balcony and had just lit a cigarette when he heard his phone ring. He took it and unlocked it. His deep and magnetic voice said slowly, "Nianji? Class is over?" Gu Nianji nodded. "Hua Xiao, what's up?" "Yeah, come over when you're free." Hua Xiaoheng looked up at the sky outside. It was a bit gray, and the northwest wind was blowing from the grasslands, carrying sand and cold. The temperature was dropping quickly. What can't be said over the phone? Gu Nianji got on her bike. "I still have to go to the library to do my homework." Hua Xiaoheng got up to turn on the air conditioner in the living room and set the temperature to a constant 23 degrees. He said, "It's better to say it in person. It's safer here. Their security measures here could guarantee that their conversation wouldn't be overheard by others." Gu Nianji immediately understood. "I'll be right there." She didn't return to the dormitory. Instead, she got on her bike and rushed to the Hepingli district. She had originally bought an apartment near the school for convenience. Gu Nianji only spent 15 minutes to take a shortcut to the Hepingli district. She locked her bike in the gazebo downstairs and went upstairs alone with her backpack. When she arrived at her room, she had just taken out the key card when the door was already open from the inside. Hua Xiaoheng's tall and straight figure appeared behind the door. "Come in." Hua Xiaoheng turned to the side to make way. His expression was calm and his gaze was calm. His calm demeanor calmed Gu Nianji's anxious heart. She walked in with a smile and looked at her room first. "When did Hua Xiao get here?" "Less than half an hour." Hua Xiaoheng acted as if he was in his own home. "What do you want to drink?" "Can I drink beer?" Gu Nianji said with a half-smile. She put down her backpack and threw it on the sofa. "Of course not." Hua Xiaoheng didn't even think about it. He turned to the kitchen. "I'll get you some milk." "Why did you ask if you knew?" Gu Nianji secretly made a face in her heart but didn't say it out loud. She sat on the sofa and stretched her legs. She let out a long sigh. After a while, Hua Xiaoheng came out with a tray. There was a glass of warm milk and a small plate of muffins. Gu Nianji had just finished class and was indeed hungry. She took the tray and drank half a glass of milk first, then ate a muffin. Hua Xiaoheng held a cup of tea and sat on the sofa opposite her. He looked at her without blinking. Gu Nianji finished the milk and wiped her mouth with a tissue before asking, "What's the matter? Tell me." Hua Xiaoheng looked down to take a sip of tea. He put the teacup on the coffee table in front of him and said slowly, "Because I don't know what kind of consequences this will have on your estate dispute case, I wanted to tell you in advance. This way, Gu Yanran wouldn't catch Gu Nianji off guard when she went to court." Gu Nianji sat up straight and looked serious. Is it related to my lawsuit against Gu Yanran? Yes. Wu Xiaoheng leaned back on the sofa and crossed his arms. His voice was low and melodious. It's like this. Ever since Yi Xian gave you the inventory of the Gu assets, we began to monitor Yi Xian and Gu Yanran. Then we discovered that Yi Xian also told Gu Yanran about this. Gu Nianji couldn't help but touch her forehead. Yi Xian still has feelings for Gu Yanran. Wu Xiaoheng couldn't help but rub his chin with one hand. He was very wise not to judge a relationship. His voice was calm and steady as he continued. After that, the two of them had a big fight, and then Gu Yanran went to Yi Xian's office building. Gu Nianji listened attentively. When she heard Gu Yanran tell Yi Xian about her father, Gu Xiangwen's lawyer in the United States, her expression suddenly changed. Oh no. Yi Xian just said goodbye to me and said he was going to the United States to meet someone. Is he going to meet this lawyer? Yi Xian went to the United States? Wu Xiaoheng was slightly taken aback. He quickly took out his phone and sent a message to Zhao Liangzi. He asked him to arrange for their field agents in the United States to secretly follow Yi Xian and see what he was up to. Because Yi Xian went to the United States, the Special Operations Forces had a lot more freedom. Gu Nianji only relaxed when she saw that Wu Xiaoheng had made the arrangements. Wu Xiaoheng then told Gu Nianji everything he knew. Finally he said, I'm telling you all this not to take credit, but Gu Yanran actually discovered that she was being monitored by us and has already filed a complaint against us to the relevant agencies in the Senate. Gu Nianji was speechless. For the sake of your case and for the sake of our agency, I've decided to remove all surveillance on Gu Yanran and Yi Xian. Wu Xiaoheng looked deeply at Gu Nianji. From now on, you can only rely on yourself for this case. Gu Nianji understood. She was very clear about what Wu Xiaoheng had done for her case. She was extremely grateful and quickly said, I understand. You actually don't have to do this. It's not good for you or your agency. I'll think of a way myself. No matter what Gu Yanran does, she's no match for me. She was confident that she could foil Gu Yanran's schemes. Even if she didn't know about the situation, she was confident that she could still adapt to the situation. You don't appreciate it? Wu Xiaoheng tilted his head as if he was joking. His handsome face attracted Gu Nianji's gaze like a magnet. She used all her strength to look away and look down. Of course not. I'm not someone who doesn't know what's good for me. If a person had feelings for another person, the other person would definitely be able to sense it. Wu Xiaoheng stood up and walked to sit next to Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji only felt the sofa beside her sink deeply. She couldn't help but lean over. As if she was throwing herself into his arms, she accidentally fell into Wu Xiaoheng's arms. Wu Xiaoheng hugged her and smiled. You came here on your own accord. I didn't force you. Gu Nianji struggled a little in embarrassment. Wu Xiaoheng's arms tightened slightly. He gently said above her head, Okay, let me hug you for a while. After today, I won't be able to see you until your lawsuit is over. What? Gu Nianji couldn't help but ask. She was in Wu Xiaoheng's arms and looked up at his beautiful jawline. Her eyes were filled with doubt and confusion. To avoid arousing suspicion, Wu Xiaoheng looked down at her watery eyes and bright red, moist lips. He couldn't help but lower his head to kiss her lips. Gu Nianji didn't avoid him this time. She obediently let him kiss her. Her large eyes twinkled, and her long eyelashes were like 2 rows of small fans. They hid the reluctance in the depths of her eyes. This was the first watch. She finally didn't have to be the scapegoat today. It's the third watch today, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. Monthly votes 6,700 plus updates at 1 p.m. The third watch at 7 p.m. Chapter 8:17. The two of them sat quietly on the sofa in the living room. The sky outside the floor-to-ceiling window was getting darker and darker, and the wind was getting louder and louder. The withered leaves fell to the ground, and then were blown away by the wind, dancing in the air. It was just like his emotions, up and down. It wasn't that Wu Xiaoheng wasn't worried. The estate dispute, which he thought was a sure win, suddenly had a twist. It seemed like Gu Yanran still had a lot of cards up her sleeve. He didn't know if Nianji could handle it. He looked down and wanted to say something, but Gu Nianji had already fallen asleep in his arms. Her breathing was calm and light, and her long eyelashes didn't move, covering the dark circles under her eyes. Wu Xiaoheng carefully studied her sleeping face and discovered that she must have been very tired recently. Her face was so pale it was almost translucent, and the color of her cheeks was very, very light, like a touch of cherry blossoms in April. Her lips were very healthy, but upon closer inspection she must have applied lipstick. Hua Xiaoheng frowned and picked up a tissue from the coffee table. He wiped her lips very gently to remove the lipstick. There were only a few coral red marks left on the tissue. Then he held her neck with one hand and wrapped the other around her knees, lifting her up horizontally. Opening the bedroom door, he saw that the bed had been changed. Hua Xiaoheng's mind flashed back to the day when the two of them had fought on the bed and actually collapsed the bed. He couldn't help but smile. He placed Gun Yanji on the bed and covered her with a thin blanket. Hua Xiaoheng also lifted the blanket and sat down. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat on the bed and took out his phone to check work emails and the progress of all parties at the same time. Time passed and the bedroom was very quiet. The windows were very soundproof, and the thick gold velvet curtains had an insulation layer to block out light and completely cover the large window that was half the height of the wall. Gun Yanji hadn't had such a relaxing sleep in a long time. It seemed like ever since returning from Germany, her sleep had been terrible. Therefore, she adjusted her schedule and was used to staying up late at night to write papers and do homework. She tried to find time to sleep during the day. However, she sometimes had classes and other things to do during the day, so she couldn't sleep as well as she could at night. As time went on, her fatigue began to show. However, she was not in a hurry. She knew that her experience in Germany had caused a relapse of the trauma that had yet to recover from many years ago. She slowly adjusted her mentality and increased her ability to withstand pressure. This time, she didn't have Hua Xiaoheng to soothe her sensitive and fragile nerves, so she could only reduce her anxiety and uneasiness by sleeping less. Although her method was stupid, it still worked. She could feel that she had gradually broken away from the panic and uneasiness she felt every day when she closed her eyes. She felt more and more sleepy, unlike when she first came back, when she could open her eyes all night and be in a strange state of excitement. Today's sleep was the most solid and deep one she had ever had since she came back. She opened her eyes and vaguely saw a tall figure sitting next to her. She didn't feel flustered. She stuck out her tongue and licked her dry lips. And Hua Xiaoheng looked at her. "You're awake." He pulled up the blanket for her and patted her back. Then he continued to look at his phone, using only one hand to tap lightly on it. Gun Yanji actually hadn't woken up yet. She instinctively looked at Hua Xiaoheng and subconsciously felt that he was the only person who could help her sleep peacefully. Although Hua Xiaoheng was looking at his phone, he was constantly looking at Gun Yanji from the corner of his eye. He couldn't concentrate at all when she stared at him like that. Hua Xiaoheng finally sighed and put the phone down. He lifted her up from the blanket and laid her on his lap. He lowered his head and began kissing her lips. At the same time, he reached his hand under her clothes. Gun Yanji gradually woke up and also felt Hua Xiaoheng's increasingly passionate kiss. She didn't resist, but she wondered why men had to touch when they kissed. Had he touched her when he kissed her before? She tried her best to recall but couldn't remember anything. She only remembered that when he kissed her, she was so dizzy that she couldn't even remember her last name. Her mind was like a pile of paste and she couldn't remember anything. She had no impression of what he had done. But now that he was kissing her, she could still distract herself from thinking about his actions while she was intoxicated. This was progress, right? Hua Xiaoheng sensed that Gun Yanji wasn't paying attention, so he squeezed her hard before letting her go. When he moved his lips away, Gun Yanji was already panting. "If you don't pay attention, I'm going to punish you." Hua Xiaoheng lowered his head to touch her forehead. "How long has it been since you last slept?" "I have slept." Gun Yanji laughed. Her little mouth seemed to be smeared with honey to trick Hua Xiaoheng. "But I sleep especially well next to you. Hua Xiao, you're like my sleeping pills. Just a small amount is enough. If you take too much, you'll get into trouble. Just take it occasionally." Hua Xiaoheng tapped her lips with his finger. "You've grown up. You know how to use flowery words to trick me." "When did I?" Gun Yanji wrinkled her nose. The tip of her nose touched Hua Xiaoheng's finger. It was warm and smooth. "Not yet?" Hua Xiaoheng symbolically patted her but a few times. "You said I'm your sleeping pill. Are you complimenting me or insulting me? How would I dare to insult you?" Gun Yanji pushed Hua Xiaoheng away and got off the bed. "You're the boss. I can't wait to serve you." "Really? Then are you going to serve me today?" Hua Xiaoheng was a bit reluctant to part with the warmth between them. He reached out and pulled her back to lie on the blanket. His fingers were already circling her waist. Gun Yanji looked at his gradually darkening eyes and looked away uncomfortably. She wanted to resist, but her whole body was very stiff. She didn't know how to respond. Hua Xiaoheng looked at her for a while and withdrew his hand. He didn't continue. He kissed the side of her face. "I was just teasing you. Look at how scared you are." Gun Yanji snorted. She definitely wouldn't admit that she was relieved. She still stubbornly said, "Scared? Ah, come on. Who's afraid of who?" "Really?" Hua Xiaoheng immediately pressed her down on the bed. Gu Nianji immediately admitted defeat. She desperately turned her head away and refused to let him kiss her again. She kept begging for mercy. Fine, fine, fine. I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid of you, okay? Don't say this kind of thing to men in the future. Hua Xiaoheng pulled her up from the bed. You only have this little guts and you still want to provoke me. You're lucky you met me. If it were any other man they would have eaten you up. Gu Nianji was rebellious. She habitually wanted to say, "Eat me up." But as soon as the word "you" came out, she knew it was inappropriate. She finally stopped in time before the word "eat" left her mouth. Hua Xiaoheng looked at her with a smile. He moved closer and lowered his voice. You what? Why did you stop? You're a good person. You're such a good person. How could you bear to eat me up? Isn't that right, Major General Hua? She reached out to hug Hua Xiaoheng's neck. Her voice involuntarily became a little delicate. Her bright eyes were like autumn water. She was like a fairy that could suck people's souls. Hua Xiaoheng's heart was racing. He thought that the little fairy was growing into a big fairy. It was indeed getting harder to fool. When he wanted to do something, Gu Nianji quickly pushed him away and got up to wash up in the bathroom. When she came out, Hua Xiaoheng had already calmed down. He stood in front of the large mirror and adjusted the buttons on his military uniform. He asked her without looking back, "I'll take you back to school? I rode my bike here. I can go back myself." Gu Nianji refused without thinking. "Wait for me to leave before you leave." Since she wanted to avoid arousing suspicion, she should avoid it completely. Hua Xiaoheng nodded and didn't say anything else. As long as she didn't resist him, it was a good start. Like a good hunter, he had enough patience to wait for his prey to fall into his arms again. Gu Nianji rode her bike alone and left the house in the Hepingli district. When she returned to the dormitory, she raised her wrist to look at her watch. It was already past 4 in the afternoon. It would be dinner in an hour. She parked her bike in the shed in front of the building and returned to her dormitory. That night, after she finished her homework, she began to reorganize her court defense strategy. It was indeed as Hua Xiaoheng had said. Gu Yanran suddenly acted like she was enlightened this time. She must have had an expert behind her. However, unlike Hua Xiaoheng, Gu Nianji didn't want to know who this expert was at all. She didn't care who he was. She would beat him up without hesitation. She hated people who hid behind people's backs and played dirty tricks. If they had the ability, then they could come out and fight with her openly. If they had the ability, then they could directly become Gu Yanran's defense lawyer. Let's see how she would beat them up in court. They only dared to hide behind people's backs and let the brainless Gu Yanran fight for them. If they had the ability, would they really do such a thing? Wouldn't that be degrading? Gu Nianji looked down on her enemy strategically. Then she would have to pay attention to her enemy tactically. She carefully recalled everything Hua Xiaoheng had said about Gu Yanran and Yi Xian. She also took out the inventory of the Gu assets that Yi Xian had given her and studied it carefully. She wondered how Gu Yanran would make an issue out of it. Also, why would Gu Yanran reveal Gu Xiangwen's lawyer's address in public? What was she trying to achieve? Was the lawyer's address real or fake? Was it to trick Yi Xian, or was it to lure the tiger away from the mountain? However, no matter how she considered it, Gu Nianji felt that Gu Yanran and the expert behind her were overthinking. Yi Xian had never thought about appearing in court to be Gu Nianji's witness. Gu Nianji had never thought about Yi Xian appearing in court to be her witness. The two of them had met because of Gu Xiangwen, but they didn't know each other well. Yi Xian handing over the inventory of the Gu assets was already a betrayal to Gu Yanran. Why would he appear in court to be a witness? As for Gu Nianji, even if Yi Xian volunteered to be a witness, she wouldn't consider it. In short, in court, if one couldn't find a witness they could trust, then they would rather have no witness. That was because the lethality of a witness suddenly betraying her was too great. Gu Nianji didn't want to bear the consequences. She wrote down her thoughts one by one and saved them in an encrypted folder on her computer. Then she sent an email to the court that was handling her case and asked when the next hearing would be. Her intuition told her that this matter couldn't be dragged on for too long. Otherwise, Gu Yanran would continue to play dirty tricks and gradually destroy the evidence. It was the second update. The monthly votes had arrived at 6,700 plus updates. She finally didn't have to be the scapegoat today. Today is the third update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. It was the third update at 7 p.m. Chapter 8:18. Gu Nianji wrote in an email to the court. Because the property case requires a lot of time to verify, I do not wish for the court to spend too much time on the adoption documents. I suggest that it be done at the same time as the property review. After she sent this email, it was taken seriously by the court that accepted her case. In fact, the court did not want to waste too much time on the adoption paperwork. They were not fools. According to the law, whether it was adopted or not, as long as there was no additional will, adopted daughters and biological daughters had the same inheritance rights. Therefore, they did not understand why Gu Yanran would want to make an issue out of the adoption documents. Even if she couldn't produce the adoption papers, she still had Barbados government documents to prove that Gu Nianji was a daughter of the Gu family. Gu Nianji had no idea what was wrong with Gu Yanran. After Gu Nianji's email was sent, Jean Wani's request to postpone the trial was finally delivered to the court. When the court saw this, they wanted to delay the trial for 3 months just to find an adoption document. You seem to be in contempt of court. Therefore, the court accepting the case accepted Gu Nianji's suggestion and rejected Jean Wani and Gu Yanran's request to delay the trial. On one hand, he set a date for the next court hearing, which was next Wednesday. On the other hand, he made Gu Yanran submit the inventory of the Gu assets for verification. At the same time, he gave Jean Wani and Gu Yanran 3 months to continue searching for the adoption documents. When Jean Wani received the court's decision, she was so angry that she slammed the table in her office, knocking over a cup of coffee. The dark brown coffee flowed all over the table and almost dirted the carpet. Yanran, the court rejected the request for a 3-month extension. The next hearing will be next Wednesday. Have you sorted out the inventory of your assets? Jean Wani still had to call Gu Yanran after throwing a tantrum. Gu Yanran was very unhappy when she heard that. She couldn't even get a 3-month extension. This Jean Wani was really useless. Fortunately, she still called that person and got some advice from her. Otherwise, she would definitely lose just by relying on Jean Wani. Gu Yanran turned on her computer and looked at the inventory of the Gus assets that she had reorganized. She sent it to Jean Wani. Lawyer Jean, this is the inventory of the Gus assets. You can submit it to the court after you've seen it. Jean Wani glanced through it quickly and secretly gasped at the Gu family's enormous wealth. This level of wealth was not something the working class could ever hope to possess. Even the working king of the working class couldn't earn so much money. But then again, the Gus were so rich, but Gu Yanran's style always exuded a sense of pettiness. In the past, when he wasn't familiar with her, he had even been intimidated by her arrogance. Now that they were familiar with each other, Jean Wani shook her head. She really didn't have a good impression of Gu Yanran. She entered the information into the computer and said to Gu Yanran, "Yanran, make another list and sign it yourself. I'll send the signed documents to the court." I still have to sign it? Gu Yanran was obviously resistant. Can't I just hand it over? Of course not, the court will treat it as an invalid document. Jean Wani patiently explained to Gu Yanran, you have to submit the list tomorrow. Hurry up. Gu Yanran curled up on the large sofa in the living room of her villa and looked at the bleak autumn scenery outside the French windows. She took another sip of red wine and printed another copy of the list while she was tipsy. She signed it and sent it to Jean Wani. As soon as Jean Wani received the signed list, she quickly sent it to the court. When the court received the list, they quickly ordered people to send letters to the banks, investment funds, and patent registration agencies to check the balance and value of Gu Xiangwen's account. Yi Xian arrived in Little Rock Canyon, Utah, but he didn't immediately visit the famous Mr. Vanderbilt. Little Rock Canyon was a very small city with a population of only 4,000 to 5,000 people. It wasn't even as large as a village in the Wuxia Empire. Almost everyone in the city knew each other. Yi Xian also didn't expect the person handling Gu Xiangwen's legal affairs and helping him write his will to be such a normal-looking, kind, and unknown lawyer who was like Santa Claus. Mr. Vanderbilt was almost 80 years old this year, but he was hale and hearty. He had white hair and a youthful complexion. Every day he took his 2 grandchildren out for walks with his dog. "Hello, Mr. Vanderbilt. Are you going for a walk or walking your dog?" Along the way, people kept greeting the kind old man. The old man chuckled and sometimes stopped to talk to people. Other times, he bent down to pick up the dirt his dog had pooped out from the lawn. It was such an ordinary person who couldn't be more ordinary who actually had a big client like Gu Xiangwen. At first, Yi Xian thought it was unbelievable, but after observing the old man for a few days, he became more familiar with him and more certain that he was the lawyer handling Gu Xiangwen's legal affairs. That was because the feeling he gave off was very similar to the feeling Gu Xiangwen gave him. They were both gentle, tolerant, kind, and good-tempered. Yi Xian just didn't know if they felt more alike after interacting with each other. With that thought in mind, Yi Xian finally walked out from behind the big tree and walked in the direction of the old man. Yi Xian still remembered that this was a typical autumn dusk in the northern part of the United States. The setting sun stretched out the shadows of everything. Yi Xian walked towards the setting sun and said to the old man, "Hello." Vanderbilt narrowed his eyes and looked at him. He smiled kindly and said, "Kid, you're finally here. You noticed me early on?" Yi Xian was a bit surprised. "Yes, you're too obvious. Although you change into different clothes and shoes every day, your aura hasn't changed at all. Whether you're wearing a plumber's uniform or a deliverman's uniform, your aura is the same. If you really want to pretend to be someone, it's best to thoroughly study that person before pretending." The old man smiled and looked at Yi Xian with a little delight at his own judgment. Most old people at this age had dementia. They wouldn't even be able to recognize their partner of decades, let alone a stranger who had observed them for a few days. However, this old man clearly had a clear line of thought and spoke methodically and logically. Yi Xian now completely believed that this person was Gu Xiangwen's legal advisor. "Mr. Vanderbilt, please forgive me for disturbing you." Yi Xian bowed politely. "My name is Yi Xian. Are you familiar with the name Kevin Ku?" The old man was smiling very peacefully, but when he heard the name Kevin Ku, the smile on his face froze for a moment. However, it quickly returned to normal and he shook his head. "No, you've got the wrong person. Mr. Vanderbilt, Uncle Gu has been in a vegetative state for 7 years. Are you really going to ignore your biggest client?" Yi Xian clenched his fists and almost grabbed the old man's shoulder and shook him desperately to wake him up. It was the third watch. "I finally don't have to be the scapegoat today. It's the third watch today, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. Good night, dear friends." Chapter 8:19. Yi Xian's words, as well as the genuine pain on his face, stunned the old man. "What vegetable? What are you talking about? Child, I'm old and my hearing isn't good. I might also have Parkinson's disease. I don't understand what you're talking about at all." The old man quickly came back to his senses and didn't want to talk to Yi Xian anymore. He took the dog and put his finger in his mouth to whistle. A middle-aged man ran over from the other side of the street and smiled humbly at him. "Mr. Vanderbilt, how can I help you? Do you want to go home?" He glanced at Yi Xian and had a deep impression of his mixed-race appearance and tall stature. The old man looked at Yi Xian. He originally wanted to chase Yi Xian away, but when he saw the dazed disbelief and confusion on his face, he changed his words. "Take the dog back. I want to walk a bit more." "Yes, sir." The middle-aged man was the Vanderbilt family's housekeeper. He bowed to Yi Xian and took the dog away. Yi Xian looked coldly at the man's custom-made Armani suit and felt disdain in his heart. In this unknown little town, even the housekeeper could wear this kind of clothing. How could he make so much money with just his resume? This despicable old lawyer still dared to say he had nothing to do with Uncle Gu? Yi Xian was filled with anger. His eyes were about to burst into flames. Before he came, he had already used his hacking skills to check the lawyer's resume. Unexpectedly, the more he checked, the more he felt that this lawyer was the kind of lawyer Uncle Gu would use. He was low-key and cautious. Although he wasn't famous, he had never made a mistake. This was the kind of person Uncle Gu could trust. But he had received a huge benefit from Uncle Gu, yet he had turned his back on him. The old man looked at Yi Xian's expression and suddenly smiled. He patted him on the shoulder. "Young man, don't be so angry. Anger makes you grow old easily and it's easy to get sick. Come for a walk with my old man, okay?" Yi Xian suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and stiffly said, "Okay." He followed the old man and turned to stroll on the tree-lined path in the neighborhood. The two of them walked to the end of the street but no one spoke. On their way back, the old man asked, "You said Kevin Ku is in a vegetative state? Who was he? Why did he become a vegetable?" "If you don't know him, why should I tell you?" Yi Xian sneered and turned his head. In an instant, 17 or 18 ideas flashed through his mind as he thought about how to threaten this old man. It's fine if you don't want to tell me." The old man took a few steps forward and said, "I'm home. Where do you live?" Of course, Yi Xian did not say anything. He raised his head to look at the most majestic building in the town. It was like a huge castle built at the very edge of the town. Not far from the castle was a small mountain, and behind the castle was a blue lake. Facing the mountains and facing the water, it was a place with good feng shui. Yi Xian laughed coldly again and said, "I'll visit you again tomorrow. I hope you've already remembered." After he finished speaking, he turned around and left, not leaving any leeway. The old man quietly looked at his back. After a long while, he shook his head and hobbled back to his house. Yi Xian returned to the hotel he was staying at. He was in a very bad mood and was too lazy to eat, so he took out a box of beer from the fridge and carried it to the balcony. He drank one can at a time. Very quickly he drank half of the box of beer. His entire body reeked of alcohol, and he sat tipsy on the balcony and sighed deeply. The middle-aged man living next to him was a field agent from the Wuxia Empire's Special Operations Forces. He had been ordered to keep an eye on Yi Xian for a few days, but he did not notice anything out of place. No one was following Yi Xian and no one was trying to hurt him, kidnap him or murder him. Could it be that they were all wrong? The man quietly returned to his room and connected to the Wuxia Empire's Nandu satellite tracking and navigation system. He sent a string of passwords back. At the same time the next evening Yi Xian went to Vanderbilt's place again and saw him walking his dog. The old man was not surprised to see Yi Xian come. Instead he smiled at him and said, "You're here again." Yi Xian nodded. His face was very haggard. He walked side by side with the old man and was practically begging him. "Mr. Vanderbilt, I know Uncle Gu must have an agreement with you. Uncle Gu's situation is very bad right now, and his daughter urgently needs your help. Please don't say that you don't know Kevin Ku anymore. It makes me very uncomfortable. I want to ask you, who are you to Mr. Kevin Ku?" The old man stopped walking and looked at Yi Xian sternly with his hands behind his back. Yi Xian pursed his lips. "I am Yi Xian. I am an orphan supported by Uncle Gu. I am greatly indebted to him, and I swore to protect the Gu family for the rest of my life." The old man stared at him for a while and his murky eyes flashed. He turned around and looked at the gradually darkening night sky. He calmly said, "I don't know the Kevin Ku who has become a vegetable. The Kevin Ku I know passed away 7 years ago. So I am not lying to you." As he spoke he started to walk away. "What did you say?" Yi Xian was both shocked and angry. He grabbed the old man's shoulder and almost dragged him back. "Say that again? You old liar. If you say such crazy things again, be careful that you won't live to see the sun tomorrow." He almost broke down as he used all his strength to grab the old man's shoulder. The old man's housekeeper saw that the situation was bad and immediately rushed over from behind. He pushed Yi Xian away and warned him, "If you come any closer I will shoot." The United States was a country that allowed people to legally carry guns. Yi Xian took a step back and didn't argue with this family. He suppressed the waves of shock in his heart and said to the old man, "Thank you. I will come back tomorrow." As he spoke he turned around and left. He drove restlessly on the way back to the hotel. But this time he didn't drive for long before the rented Jeep stalled. He took out his phone and wanted to call the rental company to change the car, but he realized that there was no cell signal here. He was in the middle of nowhere and it would take an hour or two to walk in that direction. Yi Xian waited on the side of the road for a while and didn't see any cars passing by. He thought about it. He had nothing to do anyway and he would just drink beer if he went back, so he decided to see if he could fix it himself. He got out of the car and lifted the hood to take a look. He realized that there was probably a short circuit in the wiring. He found a spare toolbox in the car and began to check the wiring. The night sky darkened inch by inch and the clouds were very thick, blocking the moon and stars. Yi Xian put in a lot of effort and spent almost 4 hours to fix the car. Because after he really took it apart he realized that not only was there a problem with the wiring, but there was also a problem with the battery. Then he found that the tires seemed to have holes in them. This road was very remote and uninhabited. He had been repairing his car here for 4 hours, but he had not seen a single car passing by. By the time the Jeep was completely repaired and could go on the road, it was already 1 o'clock in the morning. His face was covered in black oil and so was his body. When he returned to the hotel doorman almost wouldn't let him in. He had to take out his ID and key card to let him in. The Special Operations Forces field agent keeping an eye on him had already returned to the hotel. Yi Xian's movements had been very regular for the past few days. He would always leave the hotel and go to the place where the lawyer lived. He had been surveying the route for the past few days, so he didn't talk to Mr. Vanderbilt. He had chatted with him for the past 2 days, but there didn't seem to be any progress. When he followed him all the way because the road Yi Xian took was very deserted, the field agent took a different route to avoid being discovered. He returned 2 to 3 hours earlier than Yi Xian. Also, this matter wasn't the main target of the Special Operations Forces, so the field agent planned to finish the investigation report tonight and return to his post the next day. However, not long after Yi Xian returned to his hotel room, a piercing police siren suddenly sounded outside the hotel. Police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks all drove past the main road next to the hotel and sped in one direction. This was a quiet town. Usually, the biggest news was just people getting drunk and racing. However, today's situation seemed to be out of the ordinary. However, the people in the hotel were already fast asleep. The windows of the hotel were very soundproof, so they couldn't hear the siren outside at all. It wasn't until dawn that these people woke up and turned on the TV to watch the morning news that they found out what had happened. At 1 o'clock this morning, we learned that the residence of the most famous lawyer in town, Mr. Vanderbilt, suddenly caught fire. The entire mansion was severely damaged. According to the police, Mr. Vanderbilt's entire family, including his 2 sons, 3 daughters-in-law, 1 daughter, 1 son-in-law, and 4 grandchildren, were all buried in the fire. The house was almost completely burned to the ground. Only the housekeeper and the cook escaped because they lived in the servants' quarters more than 200 feet away from the main house. The cause of the accident is still under investigation. The female anchor of the morning news had a solemn expression. She wore a small black suit and appeared on camera as if she was broadcasting an obituary. Mr. Vanderbilt was highly respected in Little Rock Canyon, and everyone respected him. After the news ended, everyone thought that everything was fine. They just treated it as a tragic accident and sighed a little. Suddenly, the television station switched back to the address where Mr. Vanderbilt's house was almost completely burned to the ground. The local sheriff was holding a press conference. His expression was grim as he said into the microphone that was extended to him. "We have just verified that the fire at Mr. Vanderbilt's house was not an accident, nor was it a natural disaster. It was man-made. There were traces of highly concentrated volatile gasoline spilled at the scene, and someone reported that someone had been harassing Mr. Vanderbilt recently and had issued threats and warnings. If you have seen this suspect, please call 911 immediately. We will immediately send someone to arrest him." The photo that was displayed on the television was a photo of Yi Xian with a gloomy face and Mr. Vanderbilt parting on bad terms. It was obvious that the photo was accidentally taken from the angle of one of the houses on the street. Mr. Vanderbilt's housekeeper also confirmed that he had seen the young man arguing with the sir. He also said that the sir had mentioned to him that the young man had been following him for several days and did not know what he wanted to do. This time the American police were surprisingly efficient. Yi Xian was still asleep in bed when a group of armed police officers kicked open the door to the hotel room and shouted, "Freeze!" This was the first night watch. Today was the second night watch, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Tomorrow was the third night watch. The second night watch was 7 p.m. Chapter 820. Yi Xian had lived in the United States for many years. At this time he knew the wisest choice was to stay where he was and not move. He was only glad that he was still wearing his pajamas to sleep. Otherwise it would be embarrassing if someone lifted the blankets. Wearing bulletproof vests and helmets, the police barged into Yi Xian's room and pointed a gun at his head as they lifted the blankets. Under the blankets, Yi Xian was lying on his side in his pajamas. There were no weapons in sight. The police sighed in relief and said loudly to Yi Xian, "You have the right to remain silent. Otherwise, everything you say will be used as evidence in court. You have the right to the assistance of a lawyer. If you can't afford a lawyer, the court will appoint a free lawyer for you." Yi Xian still didn't move. He knew that not only did he have to remain silent, but he also had to remain stiff. If he moved, he could be shot in the head. The police saw that he was sensible and didn't make things difficult for him. One of them came up to handcuff him before letting him get up from the bed. Putting on his shoes, Yi Xian looked up at the police who had rushed into his room. "May I ask what crime I committed? Why am I being treated like this?" The police officer was still pointing his gun at him as he said expressionlessly, "You are suspected of murdering Mr. Vanderbilt's entire family. Now, you will come with us and wait for your lawyer to come to the police station for questioning." Yi Xian's heart sank. Mr. Vanderbilt's entire family was dead. At this time he finally understood that Gu Yanran didn't have any feelings for him at all. All these years of companionship meant nothing to Gu Yanran. He was her partner in bed, literally her partner in bed. Now she wanted him dead. Not only did this trap have to get rid of him, but it also had to get rid of the lawyer. That meant that the lawyer was indeed Uncle Gu's lawyer. It was all his fault. He was the one who brought death to Mr. Vanderbilt's family. Yi Xian's expression instantly turned ugly. Looking down, he took a deep breath and suppressed the sobs in his throat. "I want to call my lawyer." "Go ahead." The police officer raised his gun. "Where's your phone?" Yi Xian pointed under his pillow. A police officer took out his phone from under his pillow and placed it in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian rubbed his phone and opened his contact list. When he saw the lawyer's number, he thought of Gu Yanran. At that moment he could no longer trust Gu Yanran. This lawyer had a close relationship with Gu Yanran. Gu Yanran had introduced him to Huo Xiaoheng. The moment he hired this lawyer, he would be placing his life in the hands of Gu Yanran, a woman who wanted him dead no matter what. Yi Xian thought about it for a while and decided to find another lawyer. He searched the internet for a while and found the closest lawyer who charged the highest fees to be his lawyer. Yi Xian's case was the one with the highest exposure in the area, so the lawyer immediately agreed when he received Yi Xian's call and hurriedly drove to the hotel. As soon as the lawyer arrived, he grumbled to the police about Yi Xian's rights and then expressed that he wanted to bail him out. The police did not comment and said that they would take him back to the police station first. This was normal working procedure. The lawyer also followed Yi Xian. Armed police officers left the hotel with a hooded man, and it soon became clear that this was connected to the arson at Mr. Vanderbilt's house. The Special Operations Forces field agent quickly sent a message back home. When Huo Xiaoheng received the news, it happened to be past 8 at night back home. What? That lawyer's entire family was killed? Then the local police said that Yi Xian is the suspect? Huo Xiaoheng frowned as he looked at the emergency report his subordinate submitted. He stood behind his desk and leaned forward. Clenching his fists on the desk, he stared at the report for a long time before replying in a low voice, "What is real is fake and what is fake is real. This is killing two birds with one stone. Not bad." Zhao Liangzi and Yin Shixiang both stood across from him, their expressions very serious. Zhao Liangzi said, "I've already translated the secret report from the field agent. Did you see it?" Huo Xiaoheng nodded. "I saw it. Go do what you need to do. I'll discuss it with Big Xiong." Zhao Liangzi was also responsible for summarizing the large-scale intelligence of the German Federal Intelligence Service. He was so busy every day that he didn't even have time to rest. He immediately saluted and left. Yin Shixiang asked Huo Xiaoheng worriedly, "Huo Xiao, does this mean that the lawyer is real? Gu Yanran didn't lie this time?" This woman was too cunning. She lied too much. Even when she told the truth once in a while, people would treat it as a lie. It was impossible to guard against. Huo Xiaoheng thought so too, but he wouldn't shirk his responsibility because of that. From the looks of it, it should be true. Huo Xiaoheng stood up straight. It's not that she's cunning. It's that the person behind her is an expert at manipulating people's hearts. Not only is he an expert, but he also has a lot of ability to mobilize people. Huo Xiaoheng turned on the wall-mounted TV in the office. "Look, this is the American TV news report on this case." Yin Shixiang turned to look at the TV screen and saw a small town with green hills and clear waters hidden in the midst of a pale yellow mountain range. As the TV news footage changed, Huo Xiaoheng picked up the laser pointer and drew a circle around the burned house. Look, such a big house was burned down in one night without anyone knowing. Not a single person inside escaped, and then they conveniently framed Yi Xian. This case looks very difficult to believe that it was done by one person. You're saying that someone bribed the local mafia to do this? Yin Shixiang immediately looked down to search for information. Do we have information on the American mafia in Utah? Huo Xiaoheng leaned against the desk and crossed his arms. His legs stretched out lazily in front of him. He thought about it and said, "It might not be the local mafia. If you've paid attention to the problem of illegal immigrants in the United States, you'll know that the Americans are hiring these illegal immigrants from South America to commit crimes for only $500 per life." Yin Shixiang was speechless. You're saying that this case was done by a local illegal immigrant in the United States who was bribed? It's only a possibility. Of course, it could also be the local mafia. Huo Xiaoheng smiled. Since it's just a guess, we should still consider all kinds of situations. He returned to the desk and sat down. Without looking up, he said to Yin Shixiang, "Go see Chi-Chi and leak this to Nianji while you're at it." Yin Shixiang was speechless. He knew the importance of this matter and immediately agreed. He turned around to pack his things and prepared to go to B University to find Ma Chi-Chi. Ma Chi-Chi received a call from Yin Shixiang saying that he was coming to see her and would take her and Gu Nianji to dinner. He asked if they were free. Ma Chi-Chi replied happily, "Yes, yes." Ma Chi-Chi quickly arranged a place to eat with Yin Shixiang and went next door to find Gu Nianji. Nianji, brother Xiong is coming to treat us to dinner. Can you go?" Gu Nianji happened to be free that day. Although she hadn't finished her thesis, she was exhausted from the past few days and wanted to rest. She would be going to court for the second time tomorrow, so she needed to relax. Just like many students who would play like crazy before a big exam, Gu Nianji also wanted to release some stress. She agreed immediately and immediately went to shower, apply a facial mask and change her clothes. After a while it was time for Yin Shixiang to pick them up. Gu Nianji and Ma Qiqi got into Yin Shixiang's car. She consciously sat in the back seat while Ma Qiqi sat in the front passenger seat. Yin Shixiang turned around to look at her and smiled. Nianji, you're not busy today? I have to go to court tomorrow so I can relax today. Gu Nianji said nonchalantly and started playing games on her phone. You two chat. Just pretend I don't exist. Ma Qiqi blushed and pretended to cough. Nianji, what nonsense are you talking about? She turned around and happily chatted with Yin Shixiang. Although Yin Shixiang also thought it was funny, he liked listening to Ma Qiqi talk, so he also chatted with her. The two of them echoed each other and the car suddenly became lively. Gu Nianji wished she could put on headphones to calm her ears for a while. Fortunately, they arrived at Yin Shixiang's restaurant not long after. It was a private restaurant of the Tan family, so normal people couldn't make reservations. Yin Shixiang had booked it under Hu Xiaoheng's name. He had planned to eat there with more privacy so it would be easier to talk. Unfortunately, as soon as they walked in, they realized things didn't go as planned. Gu Yanran and Jin Wani were actually eating there as well. It was the second watch. 2 updates today, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. Tomorrow at the third watch. Good night, dear friends. Chapter 821. Gu Nianji froze when she saw Gu Yanran sitting at a table near the window in the lobby. She was actually quite impressed by this person. The naked short film had just been removed from the internet, and she could actually come out to socialize like nothing had happened. Her mental fortitude was truly amazing. Gu Nianji, who was especially good at learning, immediately felt that she should learn from Gu Yanran's mental fortitude. She should not be happy with material gains, not be sad about personal losses, not be evil, not be good. Something seemed wrong with the last 2 sentences? Gu Nianji couldn't help but laugh. She did it on purpose. Her plump, curvy lips curved into a happy smile, and her pretty face lit up with a very infectious smile. Gu Yanran was talking to Jin Wani with a very gentle smile on her lips. She noticed someone was looking at her from the corner of her eye, and her demeanor became even more dignified. As she spoke, she quickly glanced over. When he looked over, he was stunned as well. Her face instantly fell and tears quickly welled up in her eyes, but she forced them back down. What's wrong? Yanran? Jin Wani followed her gaze and saw Gu Nianji, Yin Shixiang, and a tall, beautiful young woman eating together. What was the girl's name again? I think she was called Qiqi. Ma Qiqi? Gu Nianji noticed they were looking at her and waved at them nonchalantly. She smiled and greeted them. Yin Shixiang and Ma Qiqi also looked over. Jin Wani quickly looked away awkwardly and lowered her head to take a sip of mango juice to hide it. Gu Yanran's heart skipped a beat. She stood up with a wooden expression and trembled. I'm going to ask her how she can still smile? As she spoke, she grabbed her Chanel handbag and walked to Gu Nianji's table. Jin Wani quickly chased after her. Yanran, what are you doing? Lawyer Jin, please let go of me. I have something to ask her. Gu Yanran broke free from Jin Wani's hand and turned to Gu Nianji. Her eyes were red as she choked out, Gu Nianji, how can you still smile? Yi Xian went to the United States to commit murder and arson because of you, and you're still here enjoying the good life. Can you face your own conscience? My father adopted you so that you could rob him of his property by any means necessary? Bully his own daughter? Yin Shixiang was overjoyed when he heard this. He had just been racking his brains to think of a way to discreetly leak Yi Xian's crimes in the United States to Gu Nianji. He could tell the truth without breaking any rules. But now Gu Yanran had stepped forward to solve his problems. He wouldn't break the rules and Gu Nianji also knew about it. What a happy ending. He had to give Gu Yanran a like. Although this was what Yin Shixiang was thinking, his face showed a serious expression. He calmly stood up from behind the dining table and said in a low voice, Lawyer Jin, what's going on? You are a lawyer and Miss Gu's representative. How could you allow her to slander others in public? Aren't you afraid of bringing new lawsuits to Miss Gu? Gu Yanran raised her finely drawn eyebrows in surprise. She looked at Yin Shixiang, then at Gu Nianji. What's wrong? Don't you know? Then she stared at Gu Nianji and sneered. It's fine if they don't know, but you're pretending not to know as well. Isn't that too fake? Gu Nianji didn't take Gu Yanran seriously at all. She sat motionlessly in her seat and smiled dryly. What do I know? Miss Gu suddenly rushed over to accuse me. Did you forget to take your medicine when you left home today? Miss Gu controls so much of the Gu family's wealth, but you can't even afford a doctor? Don't worry. Although I want to settle the score with you, I won't leave you with no money for the treatment. You're saying I'm sick. Gu Yanran pointed at her own nose. Gu Nianji, keep pretending, keep pretending. Yi Xian was arrested in the United States, but you're not sad at all. A woman like you has a heart of stone and a heart of a wolf. Splash. Gu Nianji grabbed the glass of water on the table and splashed it at Gu Yanran's face. I ignored you, but you're taking advantage of me. Gu Nianji's expression darkened. Apologize. Apologize now or I'll really sue you. I mean what I say. Gu Nianji looked sharply at Jean Wani. Lawyer Jean, you know I'm not joking. Jean Wani hesitated for a second, but her face quickly filled with smiles. She said to Gu Nianji, Second Miss Gu, it was Miss Gu's fault today. I apologize on her behalf. No, I have to make her apologize to me personally. Gu Nianji didn't let it go. She raised her chin slightly and gestured towards Gu Yanran. Making her apologize is already letting her off easy. Lawyer Jean, don't push your luck. Jean Wani's face flushed from Gu Nianji's words in front of Yin Shixiang. She didn't know how to back down. However, her self-discipline as a lawyer prevented her from saying anything worse. She could only hold it in and bite her lower lip until it bled. Yin Shixiang didn't even look at her and continued to tease Gu Yanran. What did you say? Why are you cursing someone for committing murder and arson? Miss Gu, if I remember correctly, Yi Xian is your, best male friend, right? Yin Shixiang hummed for a long time and used the word best male friend. Ma Chichi snorted and laughed so hard her shoulders shook. Gu Nianji also found it funny and nodded. Brother Xiong is right. Miss Gu, aren't you afraid of retribution for cursing your own little wolf dog like this? She knew that Yi Xian had gone to the United States to look for Gu Xiangwen's lawyer. She also knew that Hua Xiaoheng had sent Special Operations Forces field personnel to keep an eye on Yi Xian. Therefore, she was very relieved and didn't believe Gu Yanran's words at all. She only thought that Gu Yanran was exaggerating again to purposely distract her. Gu Yanran saw that these people didn't believe her and snorted. She took out her phone and found the video of the United States news. She passed it to Gu Nianji. See for yourself. Don't say I didn't warn you. Yi Xian went to the United States for you. Now that he has committed a crime like this, even if it's not the death penalty, he will be in prison for the rest of his life. Can your conscience really rest in peace? Gu Nianji glanced at the video on Gu Yanran's phone and had a thought. It didn't look fake. Yin Shixiang also came over to take a look and said loudly, Who knows if this is real or not? Nianji, search for it yourself. Gu Nianji snapped back to reality and took out her phone to search for the news that Gu Yanran had mentioned. When a series of news reports and videos appeared on her phone, her heart sank. Gu Yanran was actually telling the truth. Gu Yanran saw that Gu Nianji was looking down at her phone and didn't speak anymore. She finally put away her phone and said loudly, See, I wasn't wrong, right? Yi Xian is willing to sacrifice his life for you. He can even do something so illegal, yet you're still trying to slander me and say that he's my little wolf dog? Aren't you afraid of retribution? Gu Yanran returned Gu Nianji's words. Her heart felt like she was eating ice cream during the hottest days of summer. She had been losing ground to Gu Nianji recently and was very sullen. Fortunately, that person was smart and powerful. He helped her recover the situation as soon as he made a move. Everyone said that Gu Nianji was smart, but in Gu Yanran's eyes, she couldn't even compare to one of that person's fingers. Gu Nianji quickly finished reading all the news and videos and turned off her phone. She looked up calmly at Gu Yanran and said, Miss Gu, do you think I don't understand English? The news only said that a certain man with the surname Yi was the suspect. How could you directly convict him? The court hasn't even tried it yet. Also, the news only said that the surname was Yi. How did you know it was Yi Xian? Could this matter have something to do with you, so you knew it was him the moment you saw the news? The muscles on Gu Yanran's face twitched instinctively. She never thought that Gu Nianji would be able to see so many twists and turns just by watching a piece of news. At this moment, she decided not to act on her own. That person told her not to say anything in front of Gu Nianji to prevent her from using it against her. However, she thought that today was the perfect opportunity to build momentum and use it as evidence in court tomorrow. She didn't think that the more she said, the more mistakes she would make. Gu Yanran looked down at the table to hide the hint of panic in her eyes. She remained silent. Jean Wani finally said, When Yi Xian went to the United States, he had a huge argument with Miss Gu. He asked for the lawyer's address and said he wanted to help Miss Gu. Miss Gu saw the address on the news, and the person who got into trouble was Mr. Gu's lawyer. The suspect's surname was Yi, so it wasn't a big deal for her to make such a logical deduction, right? Miss Gu is also a lawyer. Are you going to question such a logical deduction? Gu Nianji glanced at Jean Wani and smiled. I was just asking. Lawyer Jean and Miss Gu don't have to be anxious. Alright, we're going to eat. If there's nothing else, please give us some peace. Seeing that Gu Nianji already knew about the news, Yin Shixiang secretly sighed in relief. He didn't want to eat there anymore, so he waved for the head waiter to come over. Is there a private room? The head waiter was a bit troubled. A private room requires a special reservation. Tan's cuisine had very few private rooms. Not only did it require a special reservation, but it also required someone with a certain status to make the reservation. Yin Shixiang quickly used Hua Xiaoheng's card. Hua Xiao asked us to make a reservation. Can you do us a favor? The head waiter quickly said, please wait a moment. I'll go ask the manager. After the head waiter left, Jean Wani glanced at Yin Shixiang and wanted to say something to him. However, Yin Shixiang picked up the menu on the table and approached Ma Chichi. Chichi, what do you want to eat? He was so intimate and didn't try to avoid suspicion. Jean Wani felt a lump in her throat. She couldn't get it up or down. She almost vomited. She looked at Yin Shixiang. It wasn't like she wanted to catch up with him. Did he have to treat her like this? Jean Wani's expression darkened. She turned to Gu Yanran. Miss Gu, I'm already full. Are you full? Gu Yanran didn't want to eat in the same restaurant as Gu Nianji. She had already achieved her goal, so she nodded at Jean Wani. I'm also full. Let's go. The two of them didn't even say goodbye and turned to leave. However, Gu Nianji's mind was completely focused on the news about Yi Xian. She was still thinking about it when she walked into the private room. Her brows furrowed even tighter. She vaguely felt that this matter wasn't that simple. This was the first update. It's the third update today, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. It's Monday again. Especially recommendation votes, dear. First update for Qian Mo's April's Spiritual Pet Fate, 100,000 Chidian dollars, at 1 p.m. The third update at 7 p.m. Chapter 822. When it was time to order, Gu Nianji was still distracted. Ma Chichi wanted to remind her, but Yin Shixiang gave her a look and whispered, don't disturb her. We'll just order. The Tan family's cuisine was famous for cooking all kinds of dried and fresh seafood, especially shark's fin. It could be written into a book with 108 ways to eat shark's fin. Yin Shixiang first ordered stir-fried duck liver, oysters with vermicelli and garlic, and 5-spice little silver fish as appetizers. He then ordered braised shark's fin as the main course. The braised shark's fin was made from hens that had been roasted with remania. The chicken meat was almost cooked into juice, and it matched with the thick and smooth shark's fin. It was fresh, soft, and not greasy. She looked at the menu again and finally ordered a clear broth with bird's nest as dessert. It was called a clear broth, but it was actually a clear broth. Just the chicken, duck, ham, scallops, and scallops were countless. Ma Chichi had never eaten such delicious food before, so she couldn't take her eyes off the food. There was no one else in her eyes except for the food on the table. She looked at the food lovingly, and Yin Shixiang felt like he was jealous of the food. However, Gu Nianji didn't like the taste of the food. She only stuffed the food into her mouth mechanically and ate until she was full. To her, the shark's fin was like vermicelli. Yin Shixiang saw this but didn't disturb her. Gu Nianji must be using her smart brain to think about such an important matter, so he didn't want to disturb her. After the meal, Ma Chichi burped. Gu Nianji finally snapped out of it and looked at Yin Shixiang. Does Hua Xiao know about this? Yin Shixiang poured himself some yellow wine and twirled the wine glass in his hand. Normally, foreign affairs are compiled into internal reports. I don't know if this incident was included. Gu Nianji understood Yin Shixiang's meaning when she heard his words. Hua Xiao probably knew, but it wasn't convenient for him to tell her. Gu Nianji smiled knowingly when she recalled Yin Shixiang's words and actions after Gu Yanran said those words. Yin Shixiang had specially invited her and Ma Chichi to dinner today, so it was most likely because of this matter. Hua Xiaoheng sent someone to keep an eye on Yi Xian. If anything happened to Yi Xian, Hua Xiaoheng would know immediately. Gu Nianji was very worried about the field agent Hua Xiaoheng had sent to keep an eye on Yi Xian. She was afraid that something had happened to him. Gu Nianji still felt bad about the sacrifice of the 2 field agents in Germany. Although she hadn't caused their deaths, Boren had died because of her even though she hadn't killed them. Gu Nianji felt very uneasy. She was thinking about how to ask a question that would allow Yin Shixiang to answer her without violating their rules. Brother Xiong, how have you been recently? Although you're busy with work, you have to take care of your health. Gu Nianji asked tentatively, do you want to go back and tell Hua Xiao about the American news? Yin Shixiang's eyes flashed. Yeah, it's fine. We're all fine. We haven't been busy lately. He answered Gu Nianji's question implicitly. The field agent was not implicated. Gu Nianji sighed and the smile on her face relaxed. Ma Qiqi slumped into the chair and wiped her mouth with a tissue. She finally had time to gossip. Nianji, why did Gu Yanran speak like that just now? It gave me goosebumps. Ma Qiqi shrugged. Even after something like that happened, she could still walk around as if no one was around. She didn't even wear sunglasses. I really have to give it to her. Gu Nianji, who was used to self-reflection, couldn't help but wonder if she was too thin-skinned. But when she thought about the things that Gu Yanran did that normal people couldn't do, she understood. It wasn't that she was thin-skinned, but that some people didn't have the concept of being thin-skinned at all. I also have to give it to her. Her mental fortitude is too good. Gu Nianji finished the bird's nest soup in a few mouthfuls and brought the Biluakun over to rinse her mouth. She said, Brother Xiong, thank you for today. I still have something to do, so I'm going back to school now. You and Qiqi can help yourselves. As she spoke, she grabbed her bag and rushed out. Nianji, don't leave me. Ma Qiqi reached out to stop her, but Yin Shixiang had already stopped her. Nianji is busy. Don't cause trouble. Ma Qiqi froze. Her gaze slowly moved down to their interlocked hands. Yin Shixiang smiled and quickly let go of her hand, but Ma Qiqi reflexively grabbed it. This was their first time holding hands, so they were both a bit nervous. Their palms were sweaty, but neither of them let go. They held hands like that until they paid the bill and walked out of Tan's Cuisine's door, their fingers still interlocked. When they got into the car, Yin Shixiang finally let go. Ma Qiqi blushed and got in. She held the hand that Yin Shixiang had held with one hand and kept rubbing it. She didn't know what she was thinking. Yin Shixiang actually didn't think much about it today before grabbing Ma Qiqi's hand. He didn't want her to cause trouble for Gu Nianji. But after grabbing it, he realized he couldn't let go. Neither of them spoke and drove back to the B University female graduate student dormitory. Ma Qiqi got out of the car in a panic and didn't even say goodbye. Yin Shixiang sat in the car and leaned against the steering wheel. He looked at Ma Qiqi's panicked back and wanted to laugh, but he also felt sweet inside. There was a feeling that he had never felt before rising in his heart. It was like a sense of responsibility, but it was also like a kind of impulse. He was very sure that this was the first time in his life that he had this kind of feeling of responsibility and impulse intertwined. Perhaps it was time to come clean with Ma Qiqi. Yin Shixiang raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of Ma Qiqi and Gu Nianji's dormitory. He stepped on the gas and drove away. Gu Nianji returned to campus first. She didn't return to the dormitory but went to the library instead. She found a secluded corner to search for information online. She watched the American news over and over again. As long as it was video or written news, she didn't let it go. Especially the local police station's constant press conferences to inform the media of the progress of the case. She was sure that Hua Xiaoheng must have gotten more information because that field agent should be by Yi Xian's side. Of course he was hidden in the dark. He wouldn't and shouldn't expose himself. Time passed by and the sky darkened. Gu Nianji propped her head on her hand and looked at the gradually darkening sky outside the library's large glass window. She dismissed the idea of looking for Hua Xiaoheng. She now understood that the information from Hua Xiaoheng's side was useful to them, but it was useless to Gu Nianji. That was because that information couldn't be used as evidence in court. Since it couldn't be presented to the court as public information, then she didn't want it. She wanted to find clues from the public news in the United States to deal with the possible attacks from Gu Yanran and Jin Wani. The next day's court session started at 8 in the morning. The second round of the estate dispute between Gu Nianji and Gu Yanran was held in Court A of the Imperial Capital High People's Court. This time only Yin Shixiang and Ma Qiqi came to listen. Hua Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi didn't come. Gu Yanran only brought a British housekeeper with her. There weren't many people sitting in the huge courtroom. Also, it was a closed courtroom that wasn't open to the public. The media and ordinary citizens couldn't come to listen. Only some court officials, Speaker Long's assistant, General Ji's personal secretary, and some others came to listen. At 8 o'clock sharp, everyone was present. The judge announced the topic of today's second trial, which was to verify and divide the assets according to the inventory that Gu Yanran submitted. There was also the matter of Gu Nianji's adoption documents. Because Gu Yanran's side said that it would take another 3 months to verify, this issue wouldn't be discussed for now. The judge banged his gavel and said solemnly, "Plaintiff, do you have any objections to the inventory submitted by the defendant?" The court also sent the inventory that Gu Yanran submitted to Gu Nianji. Because in an estate dispute like this, both parties needed to reach an agreement on the total value of all the assets before proceeding to the division process. Gu Nianji carefully studied the inventory that Gu Yanran submitted and compared it with the inventory that Yi Xian had given her. It was only 1/3 of the inventory. Gu Yanran listed all the patents, but only a very small portion of the bank accounts, investment funds, bank safety deposit boxes, antiques, and the holding company in the Cayman Islands were listed. Gu Nianji thought about it. The patents were easier to check, so it wouldn't be easy for Gu Yanran to hide it. However, the other assets were easy to hide. So when the judge asked Gu Nianji if she had any objections to the inventory, she immediately said, "Your Honor, I have objections." Gu Yanran raised a brow and exchanged a meaningful look with Jean Wani. Jean Wani smiled and waited for Gu Nianji to make things difficult for her. This was the second update, and the first update of the spiritual pet fate, 100,000 Chidian dollars, for Qian Mo's wife April had arrived. Today is the third update, requesting recommendation votes and monthly votes. It was Monday again, especially recommendation votes. The third update was at 7 p.m. Chapter 823. The judge clasped his hands together on the table and nodded at Gu Nianji expressionlessly. "Plaintiff, state your reasons." This was a courtroom. Regardless of whether they agreed or disagreed, they had to be reasonable and have the law to follow. Gu Nianji smiled and nodded. She turned to look in Jean Wani and Gu Yanran's direction and said with a smile, "You two seem to be very excited about my questions. Could it be that you purposely gave me a fake list and waited for me to ask questions? Then break them one by one?" Gu Nianji wasn't someone who could be led by the nose. Objection. Plaintiff is using assumptions to replace facts to slander my client. Jean Wani immediately refuted Gu Nianji. The judge looked down and looked at the list of assets Gu Yanran had submitted. He thought about it and said to Gu Nianji, "Plaintiff, please watch your words." "Yes, Your Honor." Gu Nianji bowed in the direction of the judge and looked at Jean Wani and Gu Yanran. Her expression changed and became much more serious. "Before I state my reasons, I would like to ask Lawyer Jean if you have ever told your client that fraud is a crime. Lawyer Jean, do you know that assisting your client in perjury is a serious crime for you?" "What do you mean?" Jean Wani's expression changed. "Gu Nianji, this is an estate dispute case. It's a financial case, not a criminal case. Why are you talking about fraud and perjury?" "Isn't it?" Gu Nianji walked in front of them. Her tall figure stood in front of Jean Wani and Gu Yanran. Her aura was threatening and oppressive. "Lawyer Jean, you should educate your client about the law and tell her what fraud is. According to our country's laws, fraud is an act of using fictitious facts or concealing the truth to defraud a relatively large amount of public or private property for the purpose of illegal possession. The maximum penalty for serious cases is life imprisonment. This is completely suitable for your client, Gu Yanran." Gu Yanran's expression changed and her lips trembled violently. However, because she had said too much yesterday, she still had a trace of rationality and resisted speaking to Gu Nianji. Jean Wani first looked at Gu Yanran comfortingly to tell her not to worry. She then said slowly to Gu Nianji, "Gu Nianji, you're threatening my client in court like this. I can request a restraining order from the court and forbid you from defending yourself." Gu Nianji chuckled and opened the folder in her hands in Jean Wani's direction. "Lawyer Jean, almost every country's laws have the same stipulation. Everyone has the natural right to represent themselves in litigation. This right is above a lawyer's right to representation. As long as I am in a sound state of mind and am fully responsible for legal action, the court cannot deprive me of my right to represent myself. Lawyer Jean, Principles of Law is a very good course. If you don't remember it, you can use the credit requirement for continuing education every year to take this course again." Jean Wani sneered. Her aura was no less imposing than Gu Nianji's. "Gu Nianji, you're still the same. You haven't improved at all. Do you think you can win the case by making personal attacks in court? Lawyer Jean, you haven't improved much either. First of all, assault is not a legal definition. Second of all, assault includes attacking another person's body. So your accusation is baseless. First, I didn't break the law. Second, I didn't attack your body. So you saying I'm making a personal attack is a form of slander in itself. Assault is not a legal definition, but slander is. Gu Nianji calmly flipped open her folder. But today isn't the time to discuss these issues. Lawyer Jean, it's useless to argue with me even if you argue until next year. Gu Nianji seemed to be saying something obvious. It was like the sky was about to rain or the trees were about to blow. She didn't look pleased or happy at all. Jean Wani hated Gu Nianji's condescending attitude the most. When she acted like this in court, it made it seem like the truth and the law were on her side. It made people want to curse her. Gu Nianji looked at Gu Yanran with a straight face and said calmly, "Let's get back to the crime of fraud. Gu Yanran, your lawyer didn't educate you about the law. I'll do it for you today. I'll say this first, I don't charge for educating you. I'm a good citizen of the country." Objection. The topic raised by the plaintiff has nothing to do with the case. Jean Wani had no choice. Seeing Gu Nianji getting further and further off topic, she couldn't let her lead her by the nose. Before the judge could speak, Gu Nianji immediately said, "Your Honor, I will prove that my topic is greatly related to the case." Gu Yanran was so angry that even the tips of her ears turned red. What was Gu Nianji trying to prove? Was she trying to prove that she was a swindler? Gu Yanran stood up in a flash. Jean Wani quickly stopped her. "Miss Gu, please calm down. I know what I'm doing." Jean Wani hinted that she already had a plan, so Gu Yanran slowly sat back down. Gu Nianji felt it was a pity that Gu Yanran didn't explode in court. It seemed like she controlled her temper well this time. Gu Nianji knocked on the table nonchalantly and said, "Defendant Gu Yanran, the crime of fraud is the act of using fictitious facts or concealing the truth to defraud a relatively large amount of public or private property for the purpose of illegal possession. In your case, you used fictitious facts or concealing the truth to defraud the Gu family's assets for the purpose of illegal possession. The amount of private property you defrauded was so large that it was outrageous. Therefore, if you insist on concealing the truth and don't hand over the inventory of all the assets, I can guarantee that your sentence will be the highest, life imprisonment." "You're slandering me." Gu Yanran was finally enraged and her tall chest rose and fell. Jean Wani quickly interrupted Gu Yanran and rushed to say to Gu Nianji, "Gu Nianji, you need evidence to speak in court. What right do you have to say that my client made up facts and concealed the truth? She is the biological daughter of the Gu family. What do you mean by illegal possession of the Gu family's assets?" Gu Nianji let out a long, "Oh," and spread her hands. "Fine, I didn't say it strictly enough. Gu Yanran probably had the purpose of illegally possessing my portion of the Gu family's assets. You can't deny that, right? We're standing here in court today because of this portion of the Gu family's assets that belongs to me." Jean Wani was momentarily speechless by Gu Nianji. Indeed, they were here in the estate dispute case because Gu Nianji had a claim on the Gu family's assets. "Look, Gu Yanran, even your lawyer is speechless. It's obvious that I'm right. Think about it carefully. I'll give you 5 minutes to consider whether or not you should submit another inventory of the Gu family's assets." Gu Nianji slammed a piece of white paper on the table in front of Gu Yanran. She then turned to look at Jean Wani. "Lawyer Jean, let's talk about the crime of perjury. According to our country's laws, concealing important criminal evidence or assisting in the commission of perjury during legal proceedings can result in a sentence ranging from 3 to 7 years in prison if the circumstances are serious. Judicial personnel who commit the crime of perjury will receive a heavier punishment." Gu Nianji emphasized the last sentence. "Lawyer Jean, have you thought about it? If you insist that this inventory is true, you are most likely suspected of perjury. Also, why didn't you sign this inventory of assets? Why was Gu Yanran the only one who signed it?" Jean Wani bit her lip and quickly thought about it. She avoided the sensitive topic of signing and continued to refute Gu Nianji. "Gu Nianji, according to our country's laws, if testimony or other evidence is false and not intentionally forged, then it is not considered forged evidence. As for me, I did not intentionally induce or assist in the fabrication of evidence. Therefore, even if the evidence is false, I am not involved in the crime of perjury." Gu Nianji was a bit surprised. Jean Wani had really improved. She could actually rebut her. However, Gu Nianji didn't show it and didn't pursue the matter of Jean Wani not signing it. It could be considered as letting her off the hook. Gu Nianji's eyes flashed as she asked again, "Really? But you have to think carefully. Whether or not it was intentionally forged depends on the court's verdict. It's not something that you can get away with just saying that you didn't mean it. When it came to court, there must be a solid chain of evidence to prove that it was indeed not intentional." Jean Wani fell silent again. Gu Nianji gained the upper hand by making a show of strength. She wanted to make them doubt her first so that she could carry out the next round of attacks. Your Honor, the reason why I said that the defendant Gu Yanran may be suspected of fraud, and the defendant's lawyer Jin Wani may be suspected of forging evidence is because I still have an inventory of the Gu assets here. At that moment, Gu Nianji took out the inventory of the Gu assets that Yi Xian had given her and gave it to the court staff to present to the judge. This is the third update. Today is the third update, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. It's Monday again, especially recommendation votes. Chapter 824. Your Honor, this is a list of the Gu assets that I obtained from other sources. For this reason, I compared it with the list submitted by Gu Yanran that the court forwarded to me. I can clearly see that the list submitted by the defendant, Gu Yanran, is at least 2/3 less than the list I have. Therefore, I have reason to believe that the defendant intentionally hid the assets that originally belonged to the Gu family and had ill intentions. Therefore, she is guilty of fraud. Gu Nianji looked in Gu Yanran's direction and enunciated each word slowly. Her eyes stared at Gu Yanran and did not miss a single change in her expression. However, Gu Yanran was probably prepared, so she controlled her expression very well. She showed an appropriate expression of shock, then smiled slightly and shook her head. She seemed to be sighing with an expression of disbelief. The judge looked down at the list submitted by Gu Nianji, then looked at the comparison of the two. After a long time he looked up and asked Gu Nianji, "Where did you get this list from?" Jin Wani's eyes flashed as she asked the judge. "Yes, Gu Nianji, where did you get this list?" "That's strange. Didn't you lose your memory? How could you remember how much the Gu family had? Also, you left the Gu family 7 years ago. Where did you get the inventory of the Gu family's assets?" Gu Nianji looked at Jin Wani, then at the judge. She purposely hesitated and stammered, "Do I have to say?" "Of course. Otherwise, how would we know if you obtained this list legally? Evidence in court must follow the principles of procedural justice. Once there is a mistake in the procedure, even real evidence cannot be used as evidence in court." Jin Wani immediately spoke with confidence. She appeared to be professional and sharp. "If you cannot state the source, then your list was obtained illegally and cannot be used as legal evidence in the first place." Gu Yanran finally relaxed a little about Jin Wani. She thought that she had spent so much money to hire Jin Wani, so it was worth it. The judge also said, "Plaintiff, please answer the court's question." An important principle in estate disputes is to first confirm the legality of the disputed subject matter. Only on this basis can the assets be distributed. Gu Nianji also looked troubled. After a while she whispered, "Yi Xian gave it to me." "Who is Yi Xian?" Jin Wani's heart pounded, and she was so excited that it was about to jump out of her throat. This time, Gu Nianji had finally fallen into their trap. Jin Wani was so excited that her hands were trembling. Gu Yanran, on the other hand, closed her eyes and thanked the heavens in her heart. That person could really be said to have taken every possibility into account. However, Gu Yanran also had some doubts. It was that person who told her that her father was Gu Xiangwen's lawyer. She didn't know about it at all. If she had known, she would have dealt with the lawyer a long time ago. "I won't wait until today." But how on earth did they know that? Gu Yanran was confused. Her gaze wandered around the courtroom and unconsciously met Gu Nianji's gaze. Her mind went blank for a moment. Gu Nianji's gaze swept past Gu Yanran's face. Gu Yanran could only remember Gu Nianji's bright eyes. Her eyes were dark, like fine black velvet. They were soft and sparkling under the light, but they were bottomless. They hid all her thoughts and worries. This 19-year-old girl was facing an increasingly difficult situation. How could she have such a calm and composed gaze? Gu Yanran's heart skipped a beat. When she looked again, she saw that Gu Nianji had already lowered her head and was organizing the scattered documents on the table in front of her. The judge banged his gavel. "Plaintiff, who is Yi Xian? Please answer the court's questions." Gu Nianji slowly raised her head and quickly glanced at Gu Yanran before looking back at the judge. She coughed lightly. "Yi Xian is an orphan that my father, Gu Xiangwen, once supported. After my father met with misfortune, he worked under Gu Yanran as the Gu family's computer supervisor and financial supervisor. Therefore I believe the list he provided." "So it's this Yi Xian. No wonder." Jin Wani perked up and immediately dropped her own bombshell. "Your Honor, the list of the Gu family's assets submitted by the plaintiff is not credible. On behalf of my client, I ask the court to carefully consider and not accept the contents of the list of the Gu family's assets submitted by the plaintiff." Objection. Gu Nianji immediately refuted Jin Wani's suggestion. This list was provided by the financial supervisor who is most familiar with the Gu family's assets. May I ask why the defendant's lawyer says it cannot be trusted? Jin Wani flashed a victorious smile and bared her pearly white teeth at Gu Nianji. She turned to the judge and said passionately, "Because Yi Xian is deliberately framing me. Your Honor, you may not know yet, but Yi Xian is indeed an orphan that Mr. Gu Xiangguan supported. However, after Mr. Gu's accident, Miss Gu Yanran was supporting the Gu family on her own. He took advantage of her when she was in danger and had wild ambitions. Not only did he forcibly occupy Miss Gu Yanran, but he also frequently abused her. He destroyed my client both physically and mentally. How can you believe the evidence provided by such a scumbag?" Gu Nianji revealed a stunned expression. It perfectly showed that she had no idea about this side of Yi Xian. Gu Yanran was secretly pleased. She was even more impressed by that person's strategy of killing 3 birds with 1 stone. What's more, Yi Xian not only wants my client, but also all of the Gu family's assets. My client is only a weak woman. Under Yi Xian's tyrannical power, she had to swallow her anger and deal with him. However, she swore that she would never agree to his demands. Yi Xian saw that he couldn't get any benefits from my client, so he turned to threaten her. He said that if she didn't obey him and hand over all of his assets, he wouldn't let her get a single cent. Jin Wani described it vividly like she was writing a novel. Many people in the courtroom listened with great interest, including Gu Nianji. She widened her big black eyes and said in shock, "No way? How could Yi Xian be this kind of person? Lawyer Jin, are you sure you're defending in court and not telling stories in a tea house?" Jin Wani's face was a bit hot. Her statement just now was only to create a preconceived impression in the courtroom, so she intentionally exaggerated it. That way she could gain the upper hand and create a bad image of Yi Xian for everyone. It was a bit out of line, but in a lawsuit, as long as it wasn't illegal, lawyers could do whatever they wanted. Didn't Gu Nianji use many methods in court in the past? Jin Wani silently criticized Gu Nianji and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, there is evidence of Yi Xian abusing my client." As she spoke, she presented the photos of Gu Yanran's injuries taken at the hospital a few days ago to the court. "These photos are ironclad evidence of Yi Xian abusing my client. Your Honor, please consider carefully and not accept Yi Xian's testimony," Jin Wani said calmly. Gu Nianji's eyes narrowed slightly as she quietly looked at Jin Wani. She now understood that Jin Wani and Gu Yanran's plan was to completely make Yi Xian lose his credibility as a witness. As long as he lost his credibility, all of his testimony would have the possibility of being fake and would not be accepted by the court. The judge looked down at the photos as well as the doctor's examination report and the police officer's signature. Gu Nianji didn't say anything the entire time. She waited for the judge to finish looking at the photos before saying, "Your Honor, can I see those photos?" Objection. Jin Wani immediately jumped up. "These photos are related to my client's privacy. Your Honor, please seal them and not spread them." Haha. Gu Nianji finally laughed, then retracted her smile. She asked sternly, "Lawyer Jin, this is not right of you. How can you take out evidence to support your own point of view and then not allow others to see it? Furthermore, I am not someone else. I am the plaintiff in this case. If you say that your photos have nothing to do with this case, I will definitely not see them. But you are using these photos as evidence to refute the inventory of the Gu family's assets that I submitted. That is not unrelated to this case. May I ask what reason do you have to refuse to allow me to examine the photos?" Jin Wani lowered her head and didn't meet her gaze as she said, "These photos are indirect evidence. According to the law, the judge can decide." Okay. Gu Nianji didn't look at her anymore and turned to look at the judge. "Your Honor, I can refuse to look at the photos, but I want to see the doctor's diagnosis report and the police officer's testimony. Also, I want to summon the doctor who treated the defendant, Gu Yanran, and the police officer who came into contact with Gu Yanran at the time. I need to interrogate them in court." The judge nodded. Agreed. As he spoke, he kept the photos but ordered someone to bring the doctor's diagnosis report and the police officer's testimony to Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji didn't want to see Gu Yanran's disgusting photos anyway, so it was better not to let her see them. However, she still had to fight for it. It wouldn't be good if she was too calm and made the other party suspicious. Very quickly, the court staff photocopied the doctor's diagnosis report and the police officer's testimony and placed it in front of Gu Nianji. Then the judge announced, "Due to the appearance of new evidence, today's trial is over. The new evidence submitted by the defendant will be verified by the court, and the doctor and police will be summoned at the same time. The trial will resume next Monday. The gavel struck, and the second trial of the estate dispute case ended just like that. Gu Nianji calmly put away all the documents and photocopies and put them in her laptop bag. Jean Wani and Gu Yanran looked at each other and smiled confidently. Jean Wani smiled as she walked to Gu Nianji and extended her hand. "Lawyer Gu, thank you for letting me win today." Gu Nianji didn't look up, nor did she shake her hand. She didn't even look at her. With a frosty expression, she slammed her laptop bag on the table, zipped it up, and left the courtroom without looking back. Ma Chichi, who was listening by the side, panicked and called out, "Nianji!" Gu Yanran couldn't help but laugh. "Oh my! Look at her face, it's never been so dark. She's so ungentlemanly." Jean Wani pulled Gu Yanran's arm and walked out. She laughed quietly. "All right, Yanran. Keep your mouth shut. There's a tough battle next Monday." Gu Yanran immediately calmed down, but the smile in her eyes rolled. She couldn't help it. This is the first update. Today is the third update. I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Where are the recommendation votes from the relatives? You don't even give a full vote at the third update. What a sad thing. At 1 p.m., we'll add the second update for the spiritual pet fate, 100,000 Chidian dollars, that Chen Mo's relatives gave in April. At 7 p.m., the third update. Chapter 825. Nianji? Nianji? Wait for me. Ma Chichi panted as she caught up to Gu Nianji. Holding her hand, her eyes were red. "Nianji, don't be sad." Gu Nianji glanced at Gu Yanran and Jean Wani, who were staring at her from afar. She thought about Hua Xiaoheng's usual expressionless face, and her bright eyes dimmed. She said calmly, "Chichi, I'm fine." She grasped her hand and pulled her away. Ma Chichi's heart skipped a beat when Gu Nianji held her hand, but her expression didn't change. Holding her hand, they got into Yin Shixiang's car. Yin Shixiang didn't say anything. He started the car and drove to Gu Nianji and Ma Chichi's school. On the way there, Ma Chichi saw that there was no one else and asked Gu Nianji quietly, "Nianji, what happened to you? Were you speechless because of their questions in court?" This wasn't like the Gu Nianji they knew. She had always been a person who would try to be reasonable even when she was being unreasonable, let alone when she was fighting against her opponents in court. Ma Chichi's concern warmed Gu Nianji. She shook her hand. "I'm fine. I can only judge their true intentions when they're happy. I know what I'm doing." "That's good." Ma Chichi sighed deeply and leaned back in the back seat. Slapping her forehead, she said, "But Nianji, you were really good at acting in court. Even I was fooled. I thought." Gu Nianji hugged her arm and leaned her head on her shoulder. Acting coquettishly, she said, "Chichi, Chichi, don't be angry. I was doing it for the lawsuit. I didn't want to lie to you." Her voice was coy and soft when she acted coquettishly. Ma Chichi felt her bones soften even though she was a woman. She quickly smiled. Okay, I didn't say you lied to me. Nianji, speak properly. I'm going to turn gay if you keep this up." Yin Shixiang finally coughed. "Nianji, Chichi isn't Hua Xiao. Don't try to coax her." Gu Nianji spat at the front seat and sat up straight. She said sternly, "Brother Xiong, don't talk nonsense. When did I act coquettishly? I was apologizing to Chichi." Yin Shixiang chuckled. Gu Nianji saw that Yin Shixiang didn't believe her, so she didn't explain further. She rolled her eyes 180 times in her heart, but she still needed him to speak on Hua Xiaoheng's behalf. She thought about it and said, "During the third hearing next Monday, I will interrogate the doctor and the police. Yi Xian's case will be put on the agenda." Yi Xian's case in the United States was the focus of Gu Nianji's attention recently. She was even more concerned about it than her own estate dispute. To put it bluntly, these two cases were actually the same case. Because of Gu Nianji's estate dispute case, Yi Xian's case in the United States had come about. Yin Shixiang understood what Gu Nianji meant and nodded slightly at the front. Gu Nianji turned to look out the window and pondered the questions to be asked during Monday's trial. After sending them back to school, Yin Shixiang returned to the Special Operations Forces headquarters base. Hua Xiaoheng was waiting for him in the office. Yin Shixiang closed the door and saluted Hua Xiaoheng. "Mr. Hua." Hua Xiaoheng pointed at the chair across from his desk. "Nianji has a message for me?" Yin Shixiang froze. "Hua Xiao, how did you know? I think you two really do have telepathy." Hua Xiaoheng was unmoved by Yin Shixiang's flattery. He looked at him calmly. "Go ahead." Yin Shixiang became serious. Gu Yanran and Jin Wani are fully prepared this time. They want Yi Xian dead. He had already used his phone to live-stream the trial to Huo Xiaoheng. However, what Gu Nianji said in the car had to be said by him personally. Although he didn't understand what she meant, he still repeated it verbatim to Huo Xiaoheng. Nianji said that during the third trial next Monday, she will be interrogating the doctor and police. Yi Xian's case will be put on the agenda. Huo Xiaoheng propped his chin on one hand and held the mouse with the other. He opened a few pages on the computer and looked at them. After a while he nodded. Got it. You can go now. Oh? You understand? Yin Shixiang scratched his head. You really understand? Yeah. Huo Xiaoheng didn't say anything else. He put his hands down and began typing on the keyboard with both hands. Yin Shixiang quietly left. He still didn't understand what Huo Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji wanted to do. However, he understood one thing in the afternoon because Huo Xiaoheng asked him to contact the police headquarters and asked them to keep an eye on the progress of Yi Xian's case. Time always passed especially fast for people who were in a good mood. Gu Yanran felt like it was Monday in the blink of an eye. It was time to go to court again. This time she wore Chanel's new fall-winter black and white thousand birds plaid dress suit. Her soft black hair was tied into a bun at the back of her head. Her snow-white skin didn't have any makeup on. She only had a light pink lipstick. When she looked in the mirror she actually looked like Gu Nianji. However, she didn't have her big eyes. Gu Yanran looked in the mirror for a while and seemed to remember something. The blue hole of the Caribbean kept appearing in her mind, and she felt a little dizzy. Holding on to the corner of the vanity she sat down on the makeup chair. Holding her chin she sat in front of the vanity for a while. When she saw her face in the mirror suddenly pale, she quickly took a box of blush and patted her cheeks. By the time Jin Wani came to pick her up, Gu Yanran had already returned to normal. The two of them quickly arrived at the Imperial Capital High People's Court to wait for the third hearing. Gu Nianji wore a thin gray wool business suit and a small blazer with a belt that accentuated her slender waist. Her legs were straight and slender, and her hair was casually tied into a ponytail. What's his last name? Jin Wani suddenly shouted from the defendant's stand. Dr. Liu, thank you for saving my client. Gu Nianji turned around to look at Jin Wani. Lawyer Jin, you saved the situation in time. Gu Yanran obviously didn't remember the doctor's last name. Gu Nianji was purposely provoking her earlier. Jin Wani also noticed, so she immediately called out Gu Nianji's intention and said the doctor's last name. However, Gu Yanran hesitated, and Jin Wani called out, so everyone understood that Gu Yanran didn't remember the doctor at all. Dr. Liu thought about his righteous indignation just now and couldn't help feeling a bit awkward. This was the second update. The second update for the spiritual pet fate, 100,000 Chidian dollars, awarded to Qian Mo's relatives in April has arrived. Today is the third update, requesting recommendation votes and monthly votes. Where are the recommendation votes from the relatives? They didn't even give a full vote at the third update. How sad. 7:00 p.m. the third update. Chapter 826. Gu Nianji had already achieved her goal, so she didn't continue to harp on the issue. She smiled appropriately and invited the doctor to sit on the witness stand to begin the interrogation. May I ask if you're Dr. Liu from Hepingli Hospital? Yes, I'm an emergency room doctor. That day, Dr. Liu was obviously a talkative person. Once he started talking he couldn't stop himself. Gu Nianji interrupted him gently. Dr. Liu, now you only need to answer yes or no. Dr. Liu felt awkward once again. The anger he felt for Gu Yanran's sake earlier dissipated just like that. He only felt so awkward now that he couldn't even be bothered to say anything. Gu Nianji waited for him to calm down before asking again. Then may I ask if your hospital received a lady who suddenly fainted from Block C of the Hepingli Commercial District building 10 days ago? Dr. Liu adjusted the glasses on the bridge of his nose and nodded. Please answer yes or no, Gu Nianji insisted gently. Her gaze was calm and serene as she quietly looked at Dr. Liu. Dr. Liu felt a little better and said, yes. Then is this lady in court right now? Yes, that's her. Dr. Liu pointed in Gu Yanran's direction. Gu Yanran smiled warmly at him. However, Dr. Liu was already unmoved by this. He was filled with hot blood and wanted to seek justice for the beauty. However, he found out that the fair, rich and beautiful woman who had stayed in his hospital for 2 to 3 days and had always been grateful to him did not even care about his surname. It seemed that his righteous indignation was too cheap. Perhaps in the beautiful lady's eyes, he wasn't even worth mentioning. She didn't need him to seek justice for her. Gu Nianji's first surname-related question was like a bucket of cold water splashed on the doctor's head. It also splashed on the nurses' heads, and it also splashed on the two female police officers' heads. They looked at Gu Yanran thoughtfully. No one knew what they were thinking. After Gu Nianji confirmed that the witnesses were correct, she asked again, "Then can you briefly explain the condition of the lady you treated, the defendant, Gu Yanran?" This was Dr. Lu's specialty. He immediately perked up and talked non-stop. Miss Gu Yanran's body is actually very healthy. She probably fainted because she was too angry. It's not a big deal. The real problem is the injuries on her body. Gu Nianji interrupted Dr. Lu. "Dr. Lu, may I ask what you mean when you say that the defendant, Gu Yanran, probably had a heart attack due to anger? So, yes or no? Can you give me a definite answer?" Dr. Lu looked at Gu Yanran's medical record that he had brought with him. He deliberated for a moment before saying, "I said roughly because from her examination her pulse, breathing, blood pressure and blood sugar are all normal. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any signs of fainting." "But," Gu Nianji quickly replied, "you mean that the defendant, Gu Yanran, was actually pretending to faint?" The atmosphere in the courtroom suddenly became stifling, and everyone's breathing seemed to stop. Their gazes shifted to Gu Yanran at the same time. She was a little flustered, but she knew she had no way out, so she used more willpower than usual to control her emotions. Jean Wani frowned, stood up and said, "Objection. The plaintiff's conclusion has no basis." The judge thought about it and asked Dr. Lu, "Dr. Lu, from your professional point of view, does the plaintiff's conclusion make sense?" Although Dr. Lu was reluctant, he still nodded. "That's possible. However, the human brain is complicated. Although we can't find the cause of the illness sometimes, the illness is real and not faked." Of course, this kind of situation existed, but Gu Nianji was sure that Gu Yanran didn't have it. However, she didn't continue asking because she couldn't flip Gu Yanran over in one go. If she did, she wouldn't be able to continue the show. Gu Nianji pretended to be convinced and said, "All right then, may I ask what happened after you admitted the defendant?" "After that, we happened to discover some injuries on her body, both old and new. It looked like it was caused by domestic violence, so I suggested she call the police." Dr. Lu looked at the two female police officers. "As for the rest, you'll have to ask the police." Gu Nianji thanked Dr. Lu solemnly. "Thank you for your cooperation. If there are any problems in the future, I hope you can support us." "You're welcome." Dr. Lu walked down from the witness stand and realized that his back was wet with sweat. He returned to his original seat, still very nervous. At that moment, Gu Nianji asked the nurse to sit down at the witness stand. Gu Nianji also asked the nurse the same question she had asked the doctor. After getting a definite answer, Gu Nianji asked her again, "I heard that you were the first to discover the injuries on the defendant, Gu Yanran's body?" "Yes, I discovered it in the ambulance that day." "Sai, why do you think that man is so cruel?" "Man? What man? What's his name?" Gu Nianji asked calmly. "Yixian. Yes, it's Yixian. This name is very unique and easy to remember." The nurse was a chubby young girl who was also very talkative. "Yixian? Are you sure it was Yixian? Did you see it with your own eyes or did you hear it from someone else?" Gu Nianji walked to stand in front of the nurse and confirmed again. "Yes, that's his name." The nurse glanced at Dr. Lu. "I heard it from Dr. Lu." Dr. Lu returned to the witness stand and accepted Gu Nianji's cross-examination with the nurse. "May I ask, Dr. Lu, how did you know that the person who abused the defendant was Yixian?" Gu Nianji asked solemnly as she took notes with a pen and paper. Dr. Lu's face was a bit red, but he still said honestly, "When I came to do my ward rounds, I heard Miss Gu talking to her housekeeper at the door. She said that Yixian was Miss Gu's boyfriend." "Is that so?" Gu Nianji turned to Gu Yanran. Her bright eyes were like mirrors as she looked at her quietly, as if she could see her own reflection. Gu Yanran looked away and didn't meet Gu Nianji's eyes. She didn't say anything, so Jean Wani said on her behalf, "Objection. My client didn't say anything about Yixian to the witness. As for the witness saying that he heard it at the door, this is too ridiculous. I asked the court not to accept it." This was equivalent to eavesdropping. And most eavesdropping couldn't be used as legitimate evidence in court. Gu Nianji's eyes flashed and she suddenly said sternly, "So you're saying that the defendant, Gu Yanran, didn't say that Yixian did it, and that it was completely the doctor, nurse and the police officer's own imagination?" The doctor, nurse, and the two female police officers all looked up at Gu Yanran. Gu Yanran fidgeted under their stares. She didn't seem to want to say anything, but she finally found her conscience after being stared at by these people. She covered her face and cried, "I said it wasn't Yi Xian. I did it myself. I'm begging you, stop causing trouble." In our professional opinion, Miss Gu Yanran may have been under Yi Xian's abuse for a long time, so she has already lost the will to resist. One of the female police officers said loudly to stop Gu Nianji from attempting to defend the criminal. Gu Nianji looked at the female police officer who had spoken and asked sharply, "May I ask your professional opinion is to convict the defendant in a situation where there is no defendant?" Yi Xian wasn't even here, and this female police officer hadn't even seen him. What right did she have to come up with a story of sadomasochistic love between a scumbag and a slut? It was the third watch. Today was the third watch. Asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Where were the recommendation votes from my friends? You didn't even give a full vote at the third watch. What a sad thing. P.S. This trial is still more enjoyable with a big chapter. I'll have a big chapter tomorrow. My friends, don't think it's too expensive. Book orders are all charged by 1,000 words. My book isn't more expensive than others, hope everyone knows. Chapter 827. The policewoman's face flushed from Gu Nianji's sharp question. She clenched her fists and said, "I didn't convict him. I was talking about the possible facts. Unfortunately, there are no ambiguous facts or irresponsible conjectures in court." Gu Nianji's voice became cold. "Since you've spoken, I can ask you now." "Ask." The policewoman who had shouted earlier raised her head. "I'm not lying. I'm not afraid of you asking." Gu Nianji nodded and invited her to sit at the witness stand before beginning the interrogation. Gu Nianji looked down at the policewoman's information in her hands and said, "Officer Tao, did you go to Hipingli Hospital 8 days ago to provide legal aid to the defendant, Gu Yanran?" "Yes." Officer Tao was very emotional. She was very frightened at the time but still refused to call the police, so colleague Chiu and I persuaded her. Gu Nianji asked again, "You said she was very frightened. May I ask if you did a psychiatric evaluation on her at the time?" Officer Tao was confused. "No. Since there was no psychiatric evaluation, how can you be sure she was very frightened?" Gu Nianji's expression was calm as she asked the questions slowly. However, each question was sharper than the last, and the pressure was suffocating. Officer Tao blushed slightly. "She was already in the hospital because of the beating. She cries when she sees people and she's afraid of light and people. We think, you think? May I ask if you are professional psychologists? Or psychiatrists?" Gu Nianji interrupted her rudely and pointed at Gu Yanran, who was covering herself with her arm. "Look, she still cries when she sees people. She's also afraid of light and people. If this was very frightened, then she should have broken down a long time ago. I think she should go to a mental hospital and not sit here and fight an estate dispute lawsuit with me." Gu Yanran was about to cower when she heard Gu Nianji's words. Everyone in the courtroom looked at her. She froze and her expression became very unnatural. Jean Wani quickly stood in front of her and coughed lightly. Gu Yanran took the opportunity to look down and pretend to be speechless. The corners of Gu Nianji's mouth twitched. She averted her gaze and looked at policewoman Tao sternly. "I thought that as a police officer, when encountering this kind of situation, you should act according to the law. You should examine the injury first, then provide legal aid." Seeing that Gu Nianji was denying her actions, policewoman Tao panicked and quickly said, "No, we are indeed acting according to the law. But domestic violence cases are different from other cases. We can't sue on her behalf. She must be willing to sue." Therefore, what they could do was to dispel the victim's doubts and stand up to testify against the habitual domestic abusers. Gu Nianji snorted and closed the folder in her hand. She placed it behind her back and stood ramrod straight in front of the witness stand. She said with a half-smile, "Even so, you can insist that she was beaten up by Yi Xian? Did you see him hit her with your own eyes or do you have video evidence?" Policewoman Tao shut her mouth. Although she looked indignant, she didn't say anything. "Since you don't have any evidence, how can you conclude that Yi Xian did it based on Gu Yanran's one-sided story? Where's the evidence? Where's the witness, the evidence, and the logic?" Gu Nianji pressed on, causing policewoman Tao to blush with questions. She looked at her colleague, policewoman Chiu, helplessly. Policewoman Chiu was obviously calmer and hadn't said a word. Her expression was calm, and she wasn't angry when Gu Nianji caught policewoman Tao's loopholes and repeatedly questioned her professional ethics as a police officer. Walking over from her seat, policewoman Chiu stood next to policewoman Tao and said calmly, "Miss Gu Nianji, my colleague's statement just now has factual evidence. According to statistics, the rate of domestic violence in our country is 30 to 35%. That means that out of every 10 families, 3 families experience domestic violence. And among the 30 to 35% of domestic violence cases, 90% of them are women who suffer from violence from men. Also, 99% of women who are victims of domestic violence are unwilling to actively seek legal aid. Or rather, when the law intervenes, they will actively lie to the police to hide the violence from men. My colleague's statement is also a reasonable inference based on data." Gu Nianji was stunned by policewoman Chiu's words. Although she had a way to refute policewoman Chiu's statement, in the face of such shocking data, all logical rebuttals were pale and would make her appear cold-blooded and heartless. And this was probably the starting point for Gu Yanran to use this method. The person behind her had chosen this angle to frame Yixian, so it was definitely not without reason. What kind of person would be so familiar with the data on domestic violence and be able to immediately use it to build support for Gu Yanran? It would probably be someone related to the law, right? Either a law enforcement officer, such as the police, or a lawyer from a legal aid agency. Gu Nianji's eyes flashed and she said very seriously, "Thank you, policewoman Chiu, for the data. I retract my question." As she spoke, she even bowed to policewoman Tao and policewoman Chiu to express her apology. Policewoman Tao saw that Gu Nianji's attitude was humble and didn't pester her endlessly. Her impression of Gu Nianji improved greatly. She hesitated for a moment and remembered that what she had just said was also inappropriate, so she said, "I was also in the wrong. I really shouldn't have said what I said just now. We don't know who actually abused Miss Gu Yanran, so we can't really say it was Yi Xian based on just one side of the story. I also retract my words." She then added, "Our report didn't say who did it." Gu Nianji's heart was filled with joy, and she respected the 2 practical policewomen even more. She quickly said, "Thank you for your suggestion. Then can I conclude that you confirmed that the defendant, Gu Yanran, had marks of abuse on her body, but you don't know who did it? Is that correct?" "That's completely correct." Policewoman Tao was now completely convinced by Gu Nianji, so she simply said what had happened before. "Miss Gu Nianji is very correct. We only saw the marks, and because Miss Gu Yanran pinched herself again the next day to cover the previous marks, we couldn't do a forensic examination because we couldn't examine the finger marks." "Oh." Gu Nianji turned to look at Gu Yanran meaningfully and walked over to say, "It looks like the marks on your body were really fake. In order to frame Yi Xian, you first injured yourself all over, then purposely let the doctors and nurses find out. After the police came, you were worried that they would do a finger mark examination, so you pinched yourself again and claimed that you did it yourself. That way you could frame Yi Xian and clear your name of being a fake, right?" The corners of Gu Yanran's mouth twitched. She also didn't expect that Gu Nianji would be able to guess what she had done and her motive so accurately, even though she hadn't seen it with her own eyes. Her expression became even worse. She steeled her heart and covered her face to cry. "I said I did it myself, but they didn't believe me. What could I do? I don't have the face to say what Yi Xian did to me. It's all my fault for being unlucky. I don't blame anyone." Everyone fell silent again after she cried. After all, everyone would rather believe that something like this happened than not. The 2 female police officers on the other side pitted Gu Yanran even more because they had seen too many pitiful women like her. They almost hated her misfortune and were angry at her for not fighting for it. Gu Nianji understood how the 2 female police officers felt. The truth was, if she didn't know what Gu Yanran had done when she went missing in Germany, she might have also been deceived by her. Not to mention the 2 female police officers who specialized in handling domestic violence cases. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and silently handed a tissue to Gu Yanran. As Gu Yanran sobbed quietly, Gu Nianji's voice softened. "Gu Yanran, I read your injury report and have a few questions. I wonder if you can help me answer them?" Gu Nianji's attitude suddenly became so good that alarm bells went off in Gu Yanran's heart. She didn't look up or speak. Gu Nianji looked at Jean Wani helplessly. "Lawyer Jean, is your client planning on not speaking in court? If that's the case, why don't you speak on her behalf?" Jean Wani glanced at Gu Yanran and was about to speak, but Gu Yanran had already looked up and wiped her nose with a tissue. She choked out, "You just want to see me make a fool of myself? Fine, I've already made a fool of myself. I don't care about one more." Ask away. Gu Nianji spread her hands helplessly. I just want to find out the truth. After all, my important witness is being accused of domestic violence. It's very difficult for me as well. Gu Yanran snickered in her heart, but she maintained a bitter expression on her face. I know this is very difficult for you, but Yi Xian is not a good person to begin with. Little sister, I don't want you to be deceived by him. Really? Yeah, you see, aren't you tempted by him to sue my client? Actually, how can there be a grudge between the two sisters? You can sit down and slowly discuss the inheritance. Why do you have to go to court? Jean Wani took the opportunity to persuade Gu Nianji to settle out of court. Gu Nianji didn't fall for it. She flipped through her own trial documents and said nonchalantly, Lawyer Jean, I asked you if you were speaking on behalf of Gu Yanran just now, but you didn't say. Now that I'm asking Gu Yanran, why are you interrupting? Jean Wani was embarrassed by Gu Nianji's rebuttal and returned to her seat next to Gu Yanran. Gu Nianji finally flipped to the first page of the document and said to Gu Yanran, can you repeat the incident of you being abused and beaten up again? Gu Yanran composed herself and prepared a script in her mind before slowly narrating. That night, Yi Xian came to find me and asked me to sign an agreement to transfer my assets. I refused, so he. Gu Yanran bit her lower lip and looked embarrassed. She looked like she had something to say but was too embarrassed to say it. Gu Nianji quickly stopped her. Please get to the point. When, where, and how did he abuse you? Gu Yanran frowned. I don't remember which day it was. Gu Nianji was speechless. He hit you on the head? Gu Nianji asked in return. Did he mess up your memory? No. Then why can't you remember which day it was? It's been so long. How could I remember? Gu Yanran retorted. I'm not like you. You have a good memory and hold grudges. I've always forgotten things after they've passed and never take it to heart. Gu Nianji looked at everyone in the courtroom with amusement and said, It's only something that happened 10 days ago, and Miss Gu Yanran can't remember it. It looks like you should be testing your IQ and not your mental state. If your IQ is below a certain level, you'll also be considered disabled. It's the same as mental illness and you won't have legal capacity. Gu Yanran glared at Gu Nianji. What do you mean? You're saying I'm mentally retarded? I didn't. You deduced it yourself. Gu Nianji looked down and flipped to the second page of the document. I don't remember the time, but do you remember the location? Gu Yanran froze and said angrily, In my house on my bed. Gu Nianji was speechless. Yeah, and then? What method did he use to torture you? Gu Yanran rubbed her temples and said, He used his fingernails to pinch me and his fists to hit me. He only hit me in places that were not supposed to be seen. He never hit my face. I remember you just claimed that those scars were caused by yourself. How did it become Yi Xian torture you now? Gu Nianji closed the document and rubbed her chin. She suddenly changed the topic. Gu Yanran, which part of what you said was true and which part was false? Should I give you a lie detector test? Objection. According to the law, a lie detector cannot be used in normal civil cases. Jean Wani quickly stood up to refute Gu Nianji. Gu Yanran panicked for a moment when she heard the lie detector test, but she calmed down after hearing what Jean Wani said. She smiled wryly. I wanted to let him off the hook, but I couldn't stop Lawyer Gu from pursuing him. After composing herself, Gu Yanran continued, Although Yi Xian didn't treat me well, he was infatuated with you. He didn't even want the Gu fortune and gave it to you. Gu Nianji chuckled. Gu Yanran, you just said that Yi Xian's inventory of assets was fake. How did it become the Gu fortune being given away? Then you admit that the inventory of the Gu fortune provided by Yi Xian is complete. Gu Yanran didn't expect Gu Nianji to be so shrewd and be able to analyze everything she said. She secretly felt a chill run down her spine and clenched her fists. She warned herself not to admit defeat. If she lost, there would be nothing left. Jean Wani quickly filled in the gaps and said, What my client meant was that Yi Xian gave up his claim to the Gu fortune. It doesn't mean that the inventory of the Gu fortune provided by Yi Xian is correct. Plaintiff, please do not distort my client's original meaning. Lawyer Jean knows best whether or not I'm distorting. Gu Nianji looked over without fear. Jean Wani looked at her for a while before looking away as if nothing had happened. May I ask if the plaintiff has anything else to ask? Gu Nianji raised a brow. Of course. She turned to Gu Yanran and confirmed again. I'll ask again. Was it Yi Xian who abused and beat you? The injuries on the photos provided by the hospital were caused by Yi Xian? Gu Yanran nodded and said blankly, Of course it was. You can summon Yi Xian if you don't believe me. Gu Nianji had been waiting for Gu Yanran to say this. She immediately said to the judge, "Your Honor, I wish to summon Yi Xian as a witness. Whether it's Gu Yanran's accusation of abuse or the inventory of the Gu fortune that he provided as an important witness, it's all very important to this case." The judge allowed. "I agree to the summons." Jean Wani finally breathed a sigh of relief and stood up with a smile. "Unfortunately, Your Honor, Yi Xian just went to the United States. He's already been arrested by the American police because he's suspected of murdering Mr. Gu's lawyer, the Vanderbilt family." She looked at Gu Nianji and mimicked her by spreading her hands. "You see, Yi Xian has a notorious record. Not only did he abuse and beat my client, but he also committed all sorts of crimes including murder and arson. How can someone like this be a witness? How can anyone believe the evidence provided by someone like this?" The judge was stunned. Soon, court staff sent the information about Yi Xian's case in the United States to the judge. The judge read the relevant report expressionlessly and said to Gu Nianji, "Plaintiff, are you sure you still want to use Yi Xian as your important witness?" "I'm sure," Gu Nianji said calmly. "I request to extradite Yi Xian back to the Wuxia Empire for trial." "Extradite?" Jean Wani almost laughed out loud. "Lawyer Gu, oh Lawyer Gu, don't you know that our country doesn't have an extradition agreement with the United States, so we can't extradite criminals from the United States? Otherwise, why do you think all those corrupt officials run to the United States?" Gu Nianji also laughed and said, "We can't extradite people for financial and civil cases, but Yi Xian committed a criminal case. According to customary practice, the Wuxia Empire and the American police have signed a memorandum of understanding to cooperate on criminal cases and extradite criminals back to the Wuxia Empire. But the estate dispute case is a financial case." Jean Wani caught on to the loophole in Gu Nianji's words. "You just said that only criminal cases have the possibility of extradition." "Yes, but Yi Xian is suspected of abusing and beating Madame Gu Yanran. This is a criminal case, not a financial case." Gu Nianji changed the topic and actually returned to Gu Yanran's domestic violence accusation. Jean Wani found it even more hilarious. "Lawyer Gu, let me remind you again. Domestic violence cases are not settled without charges. My client has stated many times that she won't pursue legal responsibility against Yi Xian. May I ask where your criminal case came from?" Gu Nianji was still calm and said clearly, "Lawyer Jean, I think you have also forgotten what domestic violence is defined by the law." Jean Wani's laughter hadn't stopped when she suddenly heard Gu Nianji's words. She seemed to remember something and her laughter stopped abruptly. It was very abrupt, like a goose that was stretching its neck and singing happily had its throat suddenly choked by someone. It couldn't breathe and it almost caused internal injuries. As soon as Gu Yanran saw Jean Wani's expression, her heart skipped a beat. She vaguely felt that something was wrong. But after carefully thinking about the response from before and after, it shouldn't be wrong. The plan that person provided her was closely linked and extremely meticulous. Jean Wani really couldn't see how Gu Nianji could turn the tables. At that moment, Gu Nianji threw out her trump card. She looked at the two female police officers and said, "I think the two of you might have misunderstood. Yi Xian and Gu Yanran are not husband and wife, nor are they relatives in the general sense. They are not family. Therefore, Yi Xian being accused by Gu Yanran of abusing and beating her is no longer within the scope of domestic violence. It is considered a criminal injury case. According to the law, the police have the right and must prosecute criminal injury cases without the consent of the victim. Since the criminal injury case has been established and the evidence is conclusive, and Yi Xian's case in the United States is closely related to the estate dispute between Gu Yanran and me, I urge the police to quickly file the case and request the American police to cooperate with them in this case to extradite Yi Xian back to the Wuxia Empire." Gu Yanran's expression instantly became very ugly. If Yi Xian returned to the Wuxia Empire, what chance did she have of winning? She must not let him return to the Wuxia Empire. This is the first and second chapter of 2 chapters in one. It's 5,200 words long and includes 7,000 monthly votes and chapters. Today is the third chapter. I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. The third chapter at 7 p.m. should have 4,000 words. Chapter 828. The two female officers looked at each other and said to Gu Nianji guiltily, "We will pass on your words to our superiors and have our colleagues handling criminal cases take over the case. Thank you for your trouble." Gu Nianji was very polite to them. "This is not your fault. Someone deliberately misled you and took advantage of your kindness and kindness. Gun Yanji, don't slander me. Jin Wani saw that the situation was bad and immediately stopped Gun Yanji. Gun Yanji ignored her and winked at the two female officers with a smile. See. The two female officers also smiled at her and looked meaningfully at Jin Wani and Gu Yanran before getting up to leave the witness stand. The judge banged his gavel. After the second hearing, the court will cooperate with the police to extradite Yi Xian back to the Wuxia Empire. Court dismissed. The court staff surrounded President Zhan and left. Gun Yanji returned to her seat and began to carefully pack her things. She collected all the files and laptop that were scattered on the table and put them back into her laptop bag. General Ji's personal secretary, Secretary Chao, sat in on the entire hearing and admired Gun Yanji's eloquent and clear argument style. He also studied law and joined the army after his doctorate. Because he had a high starting point and was a civilian, he followed General Ji as his personal secretary and was promoted quickly. After the hearing, Secretary Chao was supposed to leave immediately, but he still walked up to Gun Yanji and praised her with a smile. Miss Gu, today's hearing was very exciting. Gun Yanji saw someone complimenting her and looked up with a smile. She realized it was General Ji's personal secretary. She had seen him before when she was working for Hua Xiaoheng but had never spoken to him. You're Secretary Chao? Gun Yanji was surprised. You came to sit in? Yes, it was a worthwhile trip. Secretary Chao praised her again and patted her shoulder. Keep up the good work. Gun Yanji was speechless. Although she wasn't familiar with him, she still had to smile. This was the personal secretary of Hua Xiaoheng's immediate superior, so she couldn't defend him. Secretary Chao, you flatter me. Gun Yanji nodded politely. There are still trials for this case. I will continue to work hard. Good luck. Secretary Chao looked at her with a smile again before leaving. As soon as Secretary Chao left, Speaker Long's assistant also received a call from Speaker Long. Little Yang, Little Chao is already praising Gun Yanji. Why aren't you going? Speaker Long secretly called him from the hallway. The strategy and eloquence that Gun Yanji had displayed today were completely beyond Speaker Long's expectations. He was overwhelmed with emotions as he watched the entire trial. It had been many years since he had seen such a promising talent. As the Speaker of the Senate, Speaker Long had also been a straight-A student in B University's Faculty of Law. In fact, most of the members of the Senate had studied law. This was because the main function of the parliament was to enact laws. Without a legal background, it would be very difficult to be qualified for the job of a parliament member. Not only did the councillors need to be familiar with the law, but they also needed to have excellent eloquence and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. They also needed to have patience and strong logical thinking abilities. Gun Yanji's performance today had impressed Speaker Long. He suddenly understood why Hua Xiaoheng liked Gun Yanji and why General Ji supported Hua Xiaoheng to be with Gun Yanji. He was trying to keep the goodies within the family. Such good talents were all fished into his army. No way. Speaker Long couldn't sit still when he saw General Ji's personal secretary, Secretary Chao, take the initiative to chat with Gun Yanji on the big screen and even praised her. The assistant he had sent, Little Yang, sat indifferently in the gallery. No one knew what he was thinking about. Speaker Long had no choice but to personally call Little Yang and ask him to go and greet Gun Yanji. Little Yang immediately understood. Don't worry, I'll go right now. Gun Yanji had just picked up her laptop bag and was about to leave when she saw a dignified man in his 30s walk over with a formal smile. You're Gun Yanji, right? Gun Yanji was speechless. She looked around. May I ask if you're here to listen in? The person who came to listen didn't know who the plaintiff was. Who was he trying to fool? Yes, I just finished listening. You did well, but there are still areas that need improvement. Little Yang, who also studied law, was very good at teaching others. He began to teach Gun Yanji how to fight a lawsuit. Gun Yanji was a bit annoyed but still listened to him politely as she walked out. Little Yang said a few words and noticed that Gun Yanji was absent-minded. He began to look down on her. He felt that she didn't have a high status but was quite arrogant. She became arrogant after being praised by General Ji's Secretary Chao. Gun Yanji was even more annoyed by his attitude. Seeing that he kept following her, she turned and asked, May I ask how I should address you? You don't know who I am? Little Yang looked at Gun Yanji with surprise. My surname is Yang. Is your name Yanghua? Gun Yanji asked seriously. Of course not. Why do you say that? Little Yang was very confused. Yanghua? That sounds very familiar. Oh? You're not Yanghua. Why would I know who you are? Gun Yanji rolled her eyes again in her mind. Little Yang's face turned green. Yin Shixiang, who had been silently following behind them, finally couldn't help but burst out laughing. Gu Nianji turned around and saw Yin Shixiang. Her eyes flashed. "Brother Xiong, you drove here?" "Yes, I'll take you back to school." Yin Shixiang walked up and took the laptop bag from her naturally. He nodded at Speaker Long's assistant, Little Yang. "Special Assistant Yang is also here to listen in." Special Assistant Yang finally regained some of his dignity. He looked at Gu Nianji and thought that her eyes were too big, her face was too beautiful, and her figure was too good. She was curvaceous even in a professional suit. She didn't look like a capable lawyer at all. She was more like a vase. He put his hands in his trouser pockets and nodded at Yin Shixiang. "Lieutenant Colonel Yin is also here to listen in? Why isn't Huo Xiao here?" "Huo Xiao is busy. He doesn't have time." Yin Shixiang smiled. Huo Xiaoheng was actually watching the live broadcast of the trial with General Ji and Speaker Long at the military headquarters. Special Assistant Yang smiled and turned to look at Gu Nianji carefully. He thought that there must be a reason why Speaker Long called him personally to say hello to Gu Nianji. He didn't know what Speaker Long's reason was yet, but he understood that Speaker Long valued Gu Nianji. However, in his opinion, Gu Nianji's performance in court today was most likely taught by someone behind the scenes. Perhaps it was the Special Operations Forces or Huo Xiaoheng himself. His focus had always been on the Senate and wasn't familiar with the military or the Special Operations Forces. He didn't know much about Gu Nianji's past achievements in court. Moreover, he was also a top student. He only felt that Gu Nianji's performance today was passable. He didn't understand why Secretary Chao had personally expressed his goodwill. However, he had to admit that even if Gu Nianji was a vase, it was a precious mutton fat jade antique vase. It wasn't a glass vase that cost 10 renminbi on the market. Having such a vase in the office was indeed pleasing to the eye. Gu Nianji didn't like the way Special Assistant Yang looked at her. She tugged at Yin Shixiang's arm. "Brother Xiong, let's go. I still have something to tell you." Yin Shixiang nodded and pulled her into the car. He stuck his head out and said to Special Assistant Yang, "We're leaving." "Goodbye, Special Assistant Yang." Special Assistant Yang smiled and nodded. He looked at them meaningfully as they left. "Brother Xiong, you sat in on today's trial, right?" Gu Nianji sat in the passenger seat and played with the two clay dolls in the car. "I did. Nianji is getting better and better." Yin Shixiang praised her with a smile. "If Brother Xiong needs anything in the future, I'll definitely hire you as my lawyer." No. Brother Xiong, don't talk nonsense." Gu Nianji quickly helped him knock on the wood. "The bad don't work but the good do. Brother Xiong won't need me until the day I become a lawyer." Yin Shixiang knew that Gu Nianji was concerned about him. He felt very comforted and whispered, "Nianji, did you have the idea of extraditing Yi Xian from the beginning?" Gu Nianji smiled slyly. "This was also because Gu Yanran and the others were so helpful. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to return to this crucial point in the end." She then said, "Go back and ask Huo Xiao when you have time to see if this is feasible." Yin Shixiang laughed. "You don't say. When you said those words last week, I didn't understand what you meant, but Huo Xiao seemed to have understood a long time ago. He already asked us to call the police headquarters last week to monitor the progress of Yi Xian's case in the United States." "Really?" Huo Xiao thought of it last week. Gu Nianji was surprised and happy. She also felt that Huo Xiaoheng was really amazing. He immediately understood what she wanted to do and quietly helped her pave the way for the future. Yes, the people from the police headquarters should already be in contact with the American police to discuss cooperation on the case, Yin Shixiang said as he called Huo Xiaoheng. After the call went through, he said, "Huo Xiao and Yinji is in the car. Do you want to talk to her?" Huo Xiaoheng was silent for a second before rejecting. "No need. Tell her not to worry." Yin Shixiang snorted and turned off the phone. He turned to look at Gu Nianji. "Nianji, Huo Xiao said to tell you not to worry." Huo Xiaoheng had already made arrangements. As soon as Gu Nianji filed an extradition request in court, the police headquarters would immediately file the criminal injury case that Gu Yanran was suing Yi Xian. At the same time, they would quickly contact the American police to ask for cooperation on the case. Gu Nianji's eyes were a bit moist, and an unknown emotion accumulated in her chest. It was like the dark clouds rolling in the August evening sky, layer upon layer, blocking her thoughts. She nodded slightly. "Thank Huo Xiao for me." "Nianji, are you still fighting with Huo Xiao?" Yin Shixiang looked at her in shock. "Why are you angry for so long this time?" Gu Nianji's heart full of gratitude immediately disappeared. She glanced at Yin Shixiang from the corner of her eyes. Brother Xiong, drive properly. If you keep talking nonsense, I'll say bad things about you in front of Chi-Chi. How dare you? Yin Shixiang instinctively scolded Gu Nianji, only realizing that his reaction was too intense after speaking. He chuckled. I was just joking. Don't take it seriously. Gu Nianji was already covering her mouth from laughing so hard that her muscles were almost cramping. Brother Xiong, don't explain. Explaining means you're guilty, and being guilty means it's true. I get it, I get it. Yin Shixiang was rendered speechless by her. When they arrived at school and Gu Nianji got out of the car, she winked at Yin Shixiang and smiled. Brother Xiong, I was just joking. Don't take it seriously. She returned his words to him. Yin Shixiang was relieved and patted her head. Go back. Why would I be angry with you? You're like my own sister. Gu Nianji pushed her head against Yin Shixiang's hand and went back in a good mood. Gu Yanran returned from the court feeling terrible. She locked herself in her bedroom in the Xiangshan villa and didn't eat or drink. She also ignored the housekeeper, Mrs. James. She paced around the room anxiously, thinking of ways to stop Yi Xian from returning to the Wuxia Empire. Jin Wani had originally assured her that Yi Xian couldn't be extradited back to the Wuxia Empire. She didn't expect Gu Nianji to overturn Jin Wani's words in court and get the court to agree to the extradition. What should she do? She thought about it all night and finally decided to look for that person again. That person's idea not only didn't work, but it also seemed to have shot herself in the foot. Yi Xian couldn't stay. She had to quickly contact that person and get rid of Yi Xian. However, she called that person's phone countless times, but it was an invalid number. No one picked up at all. She vaguely felt that when that person said, "Don't contact me again," he meant it. But how could she not contact her? That was because her idea had screwed up. Gu Yanran thought about it all night and finally came up with an idea. Early the next morning, Gu Yanran found someone to post on the internet and was the first to expose the news of the police headquarters attempting to extradite Yi Xian back to the Wuxia Empire. She believed that as long as the news was heated up enough on the internet, that person would definitely see it and help her. Wouldn't that be the case? That person was more powerful than she imagined. Not only did she know the address of Gu Xiangwen's lawyer, but she was also able to burn his entire family to death in one night and frame Yi Xian. These things couldn't be done with money alone. What? The Wuxia Imperial Police want to extradite Yi Xian back? The sheriff of Little Rock Canyon, Utah was very surprised. But he committed a crime here. How can they extradite him back? And his nationality doesn't seem to be the Wuxia Empire? The person who came to the Little Rock Canyon police station was an agent from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also commonly known as an FBI agent. In the United States, interstate and international cases were all handled by the FBI. Of course, if the local police couldn't solve the case, they could also ask the FBI for help. Different from the Wuxia Empire's police system, the various police stations in the United States were all local. There was no superior and subordinate relationship, only the size of the jurisdiction. The only national crime investigation agency was the FBI. The FBI received a request from the Wuxia Empire's police headquarters to cooperate and specifically came to Little Rock Canyon to investigate Yi Xian's case. This was their request. We signed a memorandum before. The FBI agent patiently laid out the facts and reason with the sheriff of Little Rock Canyon. And the crime he committed here is closely related to a case in their Wuxia Empire. It's understandable for them to request cooperation. But Mr. Vanderbilt is one of our people. This person is the only suspect, so we can't let him go. The sheriff of Little Rock Canyon was very insistent. No way. You guys signed a memorandum with the Wuxia Empire, but I didn't. Don't blame it on me. The FBI agent also had a headache dealing with such stubborn people. But he had no choice. Because they weren't superior and subordinate, he couldn't order the sheriff of Little Rock Canyon to hand over Yi Xian and have the Wuxia Empire extradite him back. So their memo said collaboration, not necessity. Think about it carefully. This is a copy of the letter from the Wuxia Imperial Police Headquarters. I'll leave it here. Call me when you've thought it through. The FBI agent left a business card and left. The sheriff of Little Rock Canyon was a tough nut to crack, so he took on this matter and refused to let Yi Xian return to the Wuxia Empire. When Gu Nianji heard the news, she was very anxious and absent-minded in class. She wanted nothing more than to personally go to the United States and bring Yi Xian back. He Jichu noticed that she was restless, so he asked her to stay after class and kindly asked, "What's wrong? Is there something bothering you?" Gu Nianji didn't hide it from Hijichu and told him about the American police in Little Rock Canyon refusing to extradite Yi Xian back to the Huaxia Empire. She even complained, "The lawyer over there isn't good enough and won't speak up for him at all. I really want to go there myself and ask the sheriff why they're detaining Yi Xian. We're actually just looking for an excuse to send people to protect Yi Xian's safety. Otherwise, I can get him acquitted at any time and demand huge compensation." If they extradited him, of course the police force would be sufficient, so Yi Xian's safety would be guaranteed. Hijichu silently took the tablet and began to look at all the circumstances of Yi Xian's case. His expression was still cold and aloof, and his thin lips were pressed tightly together. He quietly read all the information and walked to the kitchen to pour a glass of red wine. He swirled it in his hand. Gu Nianji saw that Hijichu wasn't saying anything, so she picked up her bag. "I'm going back now. Goodbye, Professor He." When she walked to the door, Hijichu seemed to have finally made up his mind. He downed the red wine in his hand and suddenly called out to her, "Nianji, I'm going to the United States to be Yi Xian's lawyer and bring him back to the Huaxia Empire." This was also the 4th chapter of 2 chapters in one. It was a big chapter of 4,700 words, so it could count as the 4th chapter today, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 829. Gu Nianji stopped in her tracks at the door. She couldn't believe her ears. Pausing, she turned around to look at Hijichu and said in shock, "Professor He, did I hear that right? You're really willing to go to the United States to be Yi Xian's lawyer?" Hijichu's expression was still cold and aloof, and his tall nose made him look even more aloof and tall. He held a glass of red wine in one hand and put the other in his trouser pocket. His posture was relaxed, but his shimmering, sultry eyes were filled with determination and ruthlessness. It was just like the feeling he often gave people, full of contradictions and strong contrasts. Gu Nianji was a bit uncertain about Hijichu. Unlike Hua Xiaoheng, if Hua Xiaoheng told her he would do something, Gu Nianji believed he wouldn't go back on his word. But Hijichu? A faint trace of doubt and hesitation appeared in her eyes. It wasn't that she didn't want Hijichu to be Yi Xian's lawyer. In reality, no one was more suitable than Hijichu. In terms of the law, Gu Nianji knew that even if she went herself, she wouldn't be as confident as Hijichu. But what if Hijichu dropped the ball at a critical moment? Nothing could go wrong with Yi Xian's case. Gu Nianji couldn't bear the consequences. This was almost her last ray of hope. Hijichu was originally feeling a bit depressed, but when he saw her conflicted expression, a subtle smile appeared on his aloof face. He put down the glass of red wine and walked to Gu Nianji. Placing both hands on her slender shoulders, he said quietly, "Nianji, tell me, are you willing to stay here and live here for the rest of your life?" Gu Nianji tilted her head to look at him and asked in confusion, "Of course. I grew up here, so this is my home. I've never wanted to go to another country. Yeah, I've been to other countries, but I don't like them. I only like this place." "Okay, since you like it here, we'll stay here." Hijichu hugged her and let go before she could react. "Don't worry, I'll go to the United States and bring Yi Xian back." "Professor He, you're really willing?" Gu Nianji confirmed again. "This matter is very important to me. I don't want anything to go wrong. What is important to you is even more important to me." Hijichu stood in front of her, his hands in his trouser pockets as he looked down at her. His cold expression was tinged with warmth, and his entire being was filled with an enigmatic charm. Gu Nianji looked up at him and clenched her fists. Her palms were visibly sweaty. She heard herself say calmly, "Thank you, Professor He. When do you plan to depart?" Hijichu smiled slightly. "My private plane can take off tonight." "Ah? Leave tonight? But the police HQ hasn't been settled yet?" Gu Nianji was deeply worried. "You should go with the SWAT team from the police HQ, right? It's also safer." "You even know if it's safe?" Hijichu raised an eyebrow. "Are you worried about my safety?" "Of course I'm worried about your safety. Not only you, but I'm also worried about the special police who might go to the United States to extradite Yi Xian back to the Huaxia Empire." Gu Nianji said frankly, "But they are well trained and have the support of the country. Most people would have to think carefully if they wanted to go against them." Hijichu was silent for a long time. His gaze was as cold as ice shards on a cold night, and there was also a bit of pain. "You don't trust my abilities?" "Professor He, it's not that I don't trust your abilities. In this world, you're the only lawyer I trust wholeheartedly. If you're willing to be Yi Xian's lawyer, it's better than me going myself." Gu Nianji spoke very urgently, and it was obvious that she was sincere. Hijichu felt slightly better and patted her head. Then what are you worried about? What if we encounter those people's final struggles and desperate counterattacks? Gunyenji murmured as the worry on her face deepened. She had studied all the news reports on Yishen's case. Thanks to the sheriff of Little Rock Canyon who liked to hold press conferences, Gunyenji knew all the progress of the case like the back of her hand. When she learned from the press conference that the most elite FBI fire detection experts in the United States had already surveyed the scene of the fire, Gunyenji couldn't help but hack into the Little Rock Canyon Police Department's website and find the FBI fire detection experts' report from their system. She learned a lot of insider information that hadn't been made public. In the FBI fire detection experts' report, it was confirmed that the Vanderbilt family had been executed before being set on fire. Not only were the Vanderbilt family members among the dead, but there were also about a dozen elite bodyguards. These bodyguards were equipped with very sophisticated weapons. There were even about a dozen semi-automatic submachine guns and several boxes of bullets. Unfortunately, these guns and bullets had been used on the lawyer's family by the murderer. Also, it turned out that the Vanderbilt family was secretly very rich. Everyone knew that lawyers in the United States were very rich, but it was very surprising that a very ordinary lawyer in Little Rock Canyon, Utah, who specialized in family matters such as divorces and wills, also had such a large family fortune. He was very low-key, but he hired expensive bodyguards for himself and equipped them with heavy weapons to protect his family. Although there was such strict protection, they were all dead. With such a deranged murderer behind the scenes framing Yishen, it was conceivable that anyone who attempted to bring Yishen back to the Wuxia Empire would be met with strong retaliation. From Gunyenji's perspective, Hijichu wasn't like Hua Xiaoheng, who could rely on himself to fight against the enemy. Hijichu was smart enough, but if he really encountered a vicious criminal, Gunyenji felt that he might not be able to escape. You're actually worried about these useless things. Hijichu snorted. It looks like you don't understand me at all. Is there anything else I don't know, Professor He? Gunyenji's heart skipped a beat and she smiled slyly. She wasn't in a hurry to leave, so she put on her backpack and quietly closed the half-open door. Hijichu saw her small movements but didn't expose her. He turned to walk back to the living room and said, "There's a lot you don't know. Do I have to tell you everything? Do you still have the concept of privacy?" "I'm not going to pry into Professor He's privacy." Gunyenji followed him and said curiously, "I just want to know what Professor He is relying on to not be afraid of the murderer behind Yishen's case." Hijichu sat on the single-seater sofa, crossed his legs and raised his hand. "Make me a cup of Colombian black coffee and I'll tell you." "Really? You're not kidding me, are you?" Gunyenji was overjoyed and quickly put her backpack on the sofa. Before Hijichu could change his mind, she quickly ran to the kitchen to make coffee for him. The automatic coffee machine was very efficient, and in less than 2 minutes, Gunyenji had made a cup of fragrant and mellow black coffee. She presented it to Hijichu and said fawningly, "Professor He, your Colombian black coffee." Hijichu took the coffee cup and wasn't in a hurry to drink it. He only placed it on the coffee table in front of him and said to Gunyenji, "Do you know where Colombian black coffee is produced?" "Of course it's Colombia." Gunyenji didn't understand what Hijichu meant. "Is it really that simple?" "It's that simple." Hijichu placed both hands on the armrests. His handsome face was shaded by the light, and he was solemn and straightforward. He had an inviolable dignity. Gunyenji didn't believe him and blinked her dark eyes. "You have to at least give me some facts to support your opinion, right? Otherwise I really won't be at ease." "You won't be at ease?" Hijichu finally smiled. He leaned forward slightly and gestured for Gunyenji to pick up the iPad on the coffee table. "Search it." 7 years ago, Colombia's most famous underground godfather, Francis, was destroyed. Gunyenji was speechless. How did this relate to Colombia's underground godfather? Gunyenji was even more confused. She looked at Hijichu with confusion and didn't use his iPad. Instead, she took out her phone and searched it on the mobile network. Looking at the news in front of her, Gunyenji's eyes widened. This person was so powerful. How did he get destroyed overnight? Gunyenji was extremely shocked. The news from 7 years ago was a hot topic in the Americas. Even the United States was scrambling to report on the case that happened in Colombia, and it was still an unsolved case. Francis was the infamous underground godfather of South America. His nest was in Colombia. In this country, even the president had the final say. The other countries in South America also had to respect him. From the description of the news, This person's status was quite similar to the He family's current status in South America. Gu Nianji's expression was a little strange. 7 years ago, Francis, the underground godfather of South America, was suddenly killed. His family wasn't killed, but all his assets disappeared. Without money, the Francis family was like a wolf without teeth, and was soon disintegrated by his men. There was no more Francis family in South America. Francis, who was so arrogant in South America that even the United States couldn't destroy him with mercenaries, died silently just like that. His body hung from a street lamp on the streets of Colombia. His heart was shot like a beehive, and his entire body was almost pierced. This case was still unsolved to this day. However, no one wanted to solve this case. Everyone tacitly agreed that the United States had sent special forces to do it. Because Francis's security was comparable to that of a regular army, the army of a normal country couldn't even touch him, let alone private armed forces that could kill him. Except for the United States. So what did He Zhiqiu mean by bringing this case up? Gu Nianji finished reading the news and looked at He Zhiqiu inquiringly. He Zhiqiu looked at her quietly. His eyes were calm and unruffled. He nodded. After Francis died, the He family replaced him. Gu Nianji's long eyebrows jumped. Professor He, don't tell me that the He family is now the big boss of South America? This was absolutely unacceptable to her. If He Zhiqiu's family was really in this business, Gu Nianji considered dropping out of school. He Zhiqiu shook his head. No, my family doesn't touch drugs. Then what business does the He family do to be able to replace Francis's position? Gu Nianji was still very doubtful. The politics of those countries in South America followed the jungle principle of the strong preying on the weak. They never talked about winning people over with virtue. Arms? He Zhiqiu raised his head slightly. The He family's arms business is all over South America, Europe, and Africa. Gu Nianji narrowed her eyes and looked at He Zhiqiu thoughtfully. She remembered now. When she was in the United States, He Zhiqiu's relationship with the U.S. military was unexpectedly good. In fact, He Zhiqiu's status in both the U.S. government and military was very high. If the He family was in the arms business, it would explain a little. But Gu Nianji grew up with Huashaoheng and happened to be more knowledgeable about arms. She also leaned forward and stared into He Zhiqiu's eyes. She said thoughtfully, "Arms business can give you that kind of status in the U.S. government and military? Don't lie to me. The biggest arms dealer in the world is the U.S. They sell arms everywhere, so why would they treat you like an honored guest? No matter how powerful the He family was, they were just a family. They couldn't compare to the U.S. as a whole. A family that sold arms had a high status in front of the U.S. military arms dealer? You're kidding me again? Of course I have what they need." He Zhiqiu didn't think much of it. He leaned over and picked up his coffee cup to take a sip. It's right to have a spirit of skepticism, but when the truth is right in front of you and you still don't believe it, then that's stubbornness, not wisdom. Gu Nianji studied He Zhiqiu's solemn expression and knew that if she asked again, it would involve his family's trade secrets. He Zhiqiu definitely wouldn't say anything. She reluctantly agreed. Okay then. By saying this, do you mean that you have the conditions to guarantee Yi Xian's safety? It was the Whitewater Security Company in the U.S. that wiped out the Colombian underground godfather, Francis, and his 2,000-strong escort force in one night, He Zhiqiu said coolly. I provided the money and provided the plan of action. This time, I will still use the Whitewater Security Company. Gu Nianji's pupils instantly contracted. Could the person behind Yi Xian's case this time be on par with the South American underground godfather? Even more powerful than him. He Zhiqiu's voice was still calm, but his tone was unquestionable. However, unfortunately they encountered me. They are destined to suffer a crushing defeat. This is the first chapter with 3,700 words. 2 chapters today, seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes. The second chapter at 7 p.m. Chapter 8:30. Gu Nianji wasn't encouraged by He Zhiqiu's words and became even more worried. She frowned at He Zhiqiu. Professor He, are you sure? Or do you know who did it? If you know, shouldn't you report it to the American police and provide them with clues? Did he want to personally arrest the mastermind? He Zhiqiu stirred the small silver spoon in his black coffee and looked down as he replied dryly, How can I report it to the police? They're a bunch of outlaws. I don't know where they live and have no evidence to prove they did it. It's all my speculation, and you want me to report it to the police? Gu Nianji was speechless at He Zhiqiu's rebuttal. After a while, she found a way out of this embarrassing situation and said with a smile, "I told you, Professor, he is the only lawyer in the world that I respect." How many lawyers have you met who aren't embarrassed to say something like that? Although Hijichu said this, his face was full of smiles and much more relaxed than before. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. When the time comes, I'll definitely bring Yi Xian back in one piece." "Professor He, you must be careful." Gu Nianji bit her lip. "You should wait for the police headquarters to send people over and go with them. You'll be responsible for Yi Xian's legal affairs. Leave the security issues to the police headquarters." Gu Nianji felt that Hua Xiaoheng would also send people over, but Hua Xiaoheng's work was done in secret, so she didn't tell Hijichu. It's best if the police headquarters don't send people to the United States. If they go, they'll just be cannon fodder and die in a foreign country. Hijichu said dryly, "I'll go. It won't be good for you if they sacrifice themselves for your case." Gu Nianji gasped, her lips slightly parted to reveal the edges of two snow-white teeth that contrasted with her cherry-pink lips. She looked confused and nervous. "It's that dangerous. Then will it really be okay for Professor He to go alone?" Hijichu thought Gu Nianji looked very cute when she was so worried about him. He smiled at her for a while, then got up and walked to the bedroom. He took out a pale rose gold phone and handed it to Gu Nianji. "Take this. If you can't reach me through other numbers, use this phone." Gu Nianji curiously took it and turned it around to look at it. "What's this phone number? Why did they only use this when they couldn't get through to the others?" "Professor He, you're also high-tech." There was nothing special about the appearance of this phone. It was just that the phone's material looked very high-end. The color of rose gold was very tacky, but this rose gold had a faint silver base, which made it look elegant. It felt good in his hands and was very close to him. Hijichu smiled. "This phone doesn't have a number, so you can only call me." He pulled up his phone's contact list and sure enough there was only one number on it. The name Hijichu was written next to it. Gu Nianji, a phone without a number could only call Hijichu? You're amazing, Professor He. Gu Nianji's eyes darted around. It was obvious that she had a lot of questions but didn't dare to ask them. Hijichu patted her head and tucked her hair behind her ear. He said softly, "Take it first. I'll tell you when I have the chance." He paused before continuing, "It was my fault for putting you in danger in Germany last time. It won't happen again." He held Gu Nianji's hand and wrapped the phone in her palm. "As long as you keep this phone on you, no one can intercept your calls to me." Gu Nianji recalled the time in Germany where she had fallen into a situation where she couldn't even call for help. She felt a lingering fear and instinctively tightened her grip on her phone as she muttered, "Is this phone really that powerful? Yes, I have to keep it with me." Hijichu regretted not giving the phone to Gu Nianji earlier. But then again, if Gu Nianji hadn't been in danger in Germany, he wouldn't have known who was behind it. Gu Nianji had suffered a great loss that time, but the person who set her up had also been exposed. However, Hijichu still hadn't figured out how to deal with it. Gu Nianji chose to believe Hijichu this time. Current technology couldn't guarantee that the phone's signal wouldn't be intercepted. Hijichu's phone might really be special. "As long as I'm here, my phone will always be on for you." Hijichu walked Gu Nianji out. "But if I have to go back and you run into trouble you can't solve, just call this phone. I'll definitely be able to get your call." Gu Nianji nodded. "Thank you for your concern, Professor He. If I don't care about you, who do I care about?" Hijichu said with a half-smile. Seeing Gu Nianji blush, he sighed inwardly. However, he remembered that Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng had already broken up, so he still had a chance and time. There was plenty of time in the future. Late at night, Hijichu's private plane soared into the sky and flew towards the United States. At that moment, Gu Yanran stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in her Xiangshan villa. Draped in a flaxen cashmere poncho, she crossed her arms and quietly looked at the night sky. Jean Wani walked in with an exhausted expression. "Yanran, I heard that the police headquarters has already sent a letter to the United States requesting assistance in the case to extradite Yi Xian back to the Wuxia Empire for trial. Are you ready to confront Yi Xian?" Gu Yanran's expression was calm. "He hasn't returned to the Wuxia Empire yet. Why are you so anxious?" "How can I not be anxious? The idea you came up with was actually not bad, but unfortunately..." Jean Wani shook her head. "Hurry up and think of a countermeasure. Otherwise, we'll both be finished when he returns." Jean Wani left Gu Yanran's home very late. As soon as she left, Gu Yanran immediately used her phone to call the invalid number. Still no one picked up. On social media, the topic of Yi Xian's case that Gu Yanran had gotten people to hype had already become a hot topic. She thought about it and leaked the news that the police headquarters was sending people to extradite Yi Xian back to the Wuxia Empire to those verified accounts. As expected, this news made Yi Xian's case even more popular on social media. With such a big commotion, that person would definitely see it, right? Gu Yanran felt sleepy, so she quickly went to the bathroom to wash up before going to bed. As soon as she laid down, she heard her phone ring. Then a random text message popped up. 3 blood-red exclamation marks were like 3 blood-stained rods, but also like 3 long swords. They were filled with anger. Gu Yanran let out a long sigh. She knew that person had gotten the news. She could finally have a good sleep. He Jichu's private plane couldn't directly stop at Little Rock Canyon Airport because it was a small place and didn't have customs. He needed to stop at Salt Lake City International Airport, where the state capital of Utah was located. It was a 4-hour drive from Little Rock Canyon to Salt Lake City, and he had to pass through a deserted interstate highway in between. When He Jichu got off the private plane, the leader of the Whitewater Security Company's operations team, Little A, was already waiting for him there. Little A was a Caucasian in his 30s and had joined the mercenary army since he was a teenager. Later, he joined the Whitewater Security Company and became a core member. "Mr. He, we meet again." Little A laughed as he opened his arms and pretended to hug him. He Jichu didn't even look at him and walked forward expressionlessly. "Are you all ready? This time it's even more dangerous than 7 years ago. Don't fail miserably." "TSK, I'm also better than 7 years ago. Mr. He, believe me, this is the United States. It's our Whitewater Security Company's world." Little A laughed very happily. "The former vice president is a major shareholder. When have we ever been afraid of anyone?" He Jichu stopped in front of his private car and turned to glance at him. He said calmly, "This time, you need everyone to be equipped with 2 semi-automatic submachine guns and 4 pistols. In addition, you also need to mobilize 2 armed helicopters and at least 6 bulletproof vehicles. Also, there are a total of 67 places along the interstate highway from Little Rock Canyon to here that can be used as sniping points. You don't need to send people to guard them, but you need to plant timed explosives. The bulletproof vehicles need to be equipped with the latest integrated mortars, and the performance of the bulletproof vehicles must be able to withstand mortar attacks." Little A was at a loss. "Mr. He, are you going to fight a limited local war in the United States? They usually only used so much wartime equipment on the battlefield in the Middle East." This is the second update, tomorrow is the third. I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Tomorrow I'll add 7,300 monthly votes for my dear friends. Chapter 831. He Jichu didn't care and directly opened the door to get in the car. After sitting in the car, the dark brown windows slowly rolled down, and He Jichu's face, as clear as an ice sculpture, appeared from behind the window. He looked at the dumbfounded Little A and chuckled. "You're scared?" "Scared. The word, scared, doesn't exist in my dictionary." Little A was so agitated he almost stomped his feet, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt he needed to remind He Jichu. "But Mr. He, do you know where there are places nearby?" Little A didn't give up and grabbed He Jichu's door. "There's the famous OV Air Force Base here. You want me to bring in this wartime equipment right under the nose of these Air Force soldiers?" He Jichu's shimmering, sultry eyes flashed as he looked straight ahead and said dryly, "That's your problem, not mine. But this is the OV Air Force Base." Little A slammed the door hard and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "All the B-2 stealth bomber pilots train here. They're also the only flight squadron in the world to carry out atomic bomb missions. Fighting a limited local war here, are you waiting to be wiped out by them? Mr. He, where's your rationality?" He Jichu's expression froze for a moment, but he quickly gathered his thoughts and turned to look at Little A. His cold thin lips curled into a mocking smile. "So you're still scared? Drat." With these 2 words, the driver in the front stepped on the gas, and his bulletproof Cadillac car immediately shot out like an arrow leaving the bow. Little A almost tumbled from the car's instantaneous acceleration. He staggered forward a few steps before he steadied himself and stopped. The car couldn't catch up and instantly disappeared from his vision. Little A cursed as he took out his phone and dialed He Jichu's number again. He said gruffly, "Mr. He, your request this time is a bit excessive. I need to ask my superior." "Whatever." He Jichu wore a Bluetooth headset and opened his phone with one hand to browse the local news. Very good. There hadn't been any special incidents in Little Rock Canyon, Utah recently, and the OV Air Force Base was also operating normally. The news of him coming to the United States was temporarily confidential, so Gu Nianji wouldn't tell anyone. Only when he went to the police station to request bail for Yi Xian would the news that he was in the United States spread. At that time, everything he required must be in place. The car window was not closed and the salty wind blew from the wilderness, bringing with it an icy chill. Yijichu took a deep breath. His fingers trembled uncontrollably and he gripped his gun. He had been a lawyer for so long that he had forgotten what he used to do. Uncle Gu was right. A person's potential was limitless. This sentence was not a figure of speech, nor was it a figure of speech. It was the literal meaning. Closing his eyes slightly, Yijichu, who hadn't slept for a day and a night, fell asleep. Brother, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up. It was Gu Nianji's 12th birthday. She was wearing a pink diamond crown and a pink chiffon dress. Her chubby little face was round, and her chubby little hands were clutching the hem of his shirt. He could clearly see the little dimples on the back of her hands. Brother, Yijichu corrected her without batting an eyelid. That was when he was 22 years old and he was even colder than he was now. He would only show a hint of warmth when he saw Gu Nianji. From the 6-year-old girl who would hide and tremble when she first arrived to the lively, cheerful and lovable little girl now, his hard work over the past 6 years had not been in vain. Brother I want to be a lawyer when I grow up. I want to be as prestigious as Brother He's mother. The 12-year-old Gu Nianji insisted on her dream. Actually, it was only because she had watched the video archive of Yijichu's mother defending herself in court. Yes, when you graduate from university, you can apply to law school and become a lawyer. Yijichu stood beside her and bowed to push a birthday cake in front of her. He looked at her with a smile. My little princess, blow out the candles. Blow out the candles. Blow out the candles. The guests cheered in unison. I still have to wait until I graduate from university? I can't wait. I want to be a lawyer tomorrow. The 12-year-old Gu Nianji loudly announced her birthday wish. At the same time, she puffed up her chubby little face and blew out all the candles in one breath. The chandelier in the living room suddenly went out, and the room suddenly became very dark. It was so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. The guests in the room held their breath, thinking it was a special program. It was the He family's only son's little fiancé's 12th birthday. Everyone was looking forward to a different program. After all, in the past 5 birthdays, everyone had been surprised every year. But the surprise of that year was just too great. When the lights came back on, everyone in the room was in the same place except for Gu Nianji. Yijichu stood alone next to the cake and Gu Nianji, who had been next to him, had disappeared. A pink diamond crown had fallen to the ground, and under the chandelier, it emitted a dazzling rainbow halo. Screech. The Cadillac's bulletproof car suddenly braked and stopped in front of the largest 4-star hotel in the suburbs of Little Rock Canyon. Yijichu's body swayed and he woke up from his dream. His thoughts were still stuck on the day of Gu Nianji's birthday 7 years ago. From the time the lights went out to when they came back on, only 7 seconds had passed. And in those 7 seconds, Gu Xiangwen had stolen Gu Nianji from Yijichu's side without anyone noticing. In the beginning, he didn't know who had stolen Gu Nianji from the crowd. He only remembered flying into a rage and immediately declaring martial law in the city. He sent a large number of soldiers to search every house. After 7 days and 7 nights, he finally received news, but by the time he arrived, it was already too late. All he heard was a loud rumble, and then he saw flames soaring into the sky and a mushroom cloud rising into the sky. Gu Nianji's father, Gu Xiangwen, was laughing maniacally in the fire, like a real lunatic. Yijichu rubbed his forehead and waited for the driver to open the door for him. Ever since he found Gu Nianji, he hadn't had this dream again. He didn't expect to have another dream in the car today. The door opened and Yijichu stepped out. His assistant from the American law firm, Smith, had been waiting on the steps of the hotel for a long time. Lawyer you're finally here. Smith happily came down the steps. What do you want me to do? Just tell me what to do. Yijichu looked at him and curled his lips slightly. His aloof face was calm. Did you receive the message I sent you? I did. I already contacted Yi Xian's lawyer, and he agreed to hand Yi Xian over to us. However, he had one condition. Smith chuckled. I didn't think it was a big deal, so I agreed. What condition? Yijichu didn't stop walking as he walked to the hotel lobby. He wants to see you and exchange business cards with you, Smith said happily as he followed Hijichu into the hotel lobby. In the hotel lobby, the lawyer Yi Xian had randomly found stood up excitedly and walked over to Hijichu eagerly. He reached out his hand and his voice was trembling with excitement. "Is this lawyer he? Nice to meet you." Hijichu's name was legendary in the American legal world. He rarely appeared in court, so when he took the initiative to contact him this time to be the lawyer for an arson and murder suspect, the lawyer almost thought it was a prank on a TV station and blurted out a curse at Smith. It wasn't until Smith used their law firm's work email account to send him an official email that the lawyer was dumbfounded. He quickly went to the police station to visit Yi Xian and told him about the matter. Yi Xian was slightly surprised, but he didn't object when he thought of Hijichu's relationship with Gunyanji. The lawyer's transfer agreement was signed very smoothly. Now he only had to wait for Hijichu to sign as well to officially establish a client relationship with Yi Xian. Hijichu was also very polite to this sensible lawyer. He nodded. "Nice to meet you." The two of them chatted for a while and exchanged business cards. Hijichu said he needed to get used to the time difference and returned to his room to rest. Smith was left there to handle the handover with the lawyer. The lawyer returned happily after receiving Hijichu's business card. He framed the card and hung it in the most eye-catching position in his office. It also became one of his signboards. Hijichu didn't know any of this. Or rather, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. Right now, all his attention was on Yi Xian's case. After Smith sent the lawyer off, Hijichu called Smith. "Contact the Little Rock Canyon police station immediately. I'm going to visit Yi Xian and prepare for bail." "Okay, lawyer he." Smith immediately transferred the call to the Little Rock Canyon police station. When the Little Rock Canyon police chief heard that Yi Xian had changed his lawyer, and this lawyer seemed to have some background, he was even more unconvinced. He waved his thick fists and roared at Hijichu and Smith in the office, "Bail? Don't even think about it. Not unless you step over my dead body." Hijichu folded his hands behind his back and said coldly, "Mr. Sheriff, whether or not he can be released on bail is not up to you. I'm just reminding you. I don't have the final say." "Are you saying you have the final say?" The Little Rock Canyon police chief had worked here his entire life. He had started as a small police officer and had already worked in this police station for nearly 30 years. Here his words were law and order. "Of course I don't have the final say. The judge has the final say." Hijichu didn't mince words with this kind of tyrant sheriff. "I will apply to the judge to schedule the court hearing ahead of time." "What right do you have to do that?" The sheriff was furious. "There are rules for court scheduling. It hasn't been his case yet, so you can't have special privileges." "Special privileges? I thought you were the one who had special privileges, Mr. Sheriff. You have been detaining my client for more than 72 hours. I will reserve the right to seek compensation from the Little Rock Canyon city government and police." Hijichu glanced at the sheriff coldly and picked up his phone. In front of the sheriff, he called the high court in charge of the Little Rock Canyon area in Utah. This was the first watch. Today was the third watch, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. "Where are the recommendation votes from your friends? You have to vote all of them." Oh. At 1 p.m. The monthly votes were 7,300 plus watch. At 7 p.m. The third watch. P.S. Friends, it is indeed very interesting to guess the plot, but guessing is guessing. Don't hurt the harmony. If you guess correctly, you will be rewarded with a kiss. If you don't guess correctly, just treat it as an unexpected surprise. In short, don't get angry. Also, if you feel that the plot seems contradictory, express your impatience and continue reading. I usually don't give any hints about the plot direction because it will affect everyone's enjoyment of reading too much. Chapter 832. The sheriff of Little Rock Canyon didn't know about Hijichu's fame and only knew that he had a powerful background. However, the judge of the Utah Supreme Court knew that Hijichu's background wasn't just famous. Over the last year, Hijichu had provided an astonishing number of political donations to various senators and public officials. Coupled with his high status in both the political and military circles, he had attracted the attention of the legal profession. Upon receiving Hijichu's call, the judge of the Utah Supreme Court immediately said that he would schedule Yi Xian's case earlier. At the same time, he agreed to Hijichu's bail without another word. Half an hour later, the order personally signed by the judge of the Utah Supreme Court was sent to the Little Rock Canyon Sheriff's office. "What? Agreed to bail?" The sheriff was furious. "I haven't even agreed yet. How dare he? Mr. Sheriff, I advise you to stop talking. If you continue talking, your public pension will be gone. Hijichu coldly interrupted the sheriff's complaints. What kind of public official didn't have a pension after retirement? A convicted public official. Are you threatening me? I didn't break the law. The sheriff of Little Rock Canyon began to get nervous. His red, round nose beaded with sweat. Using illegal means to obstruct my client's access to justice, the court will give a fair judgment. Hijichu didn't want to waste time with him anymore. He motioned for Smith to show the sheriff the high court's order approving bail. Okay, I want to take my client away. The sheriff stared at the piece of paper and suddenly said, this requires a bail of $1 million US. Where's your money? I've already handed it over to the court. Hijichu's lips twitched. Otherwise, do you think the court would sign a bail order for free? Hijichu's forcefulness made the sheriff of Little Rock Canyon feel like his seniority wasn't enough for the first time. He began to miss Yi Xian's previous lawyer. He was really easy to talk to and listen to whatever he said. He never spoke from the suspect's standpoint. The sheriff of Little Rock Canyon had a very bad impression of Hijichu. He felt that Hijichu was the kind of greedy, blood-sucking lawyer who would defend anyone as long as he was paid. The iron door of the detention center opened. Yi Xian sat up from the single bed and instinctively used his arm to block his view. The light coming from the door was too dazzling. Yi Xian, who had been in the little dark room for several days, was not used to it. Hijichu stood at the door with one hand in his pocket and did not enter. He said coldly, let's go. You're bailed out. Yi Xian abruptly lowered his arm. Really? Hijichu turned around and left without another word. Yi Xian saw that the detention center's metal door wasn't closed again, so he hurriedly rushed out. The policeman at the door nodded to him and did not stop him. Yi Xian breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed like he had really been bailed out. He followed Hijichu out of the police station and back to the hotel. Yi Xian didn't speak the entire time. It wasn't until they entered the room that Yi Xian said, thank you, Mr. He. How much is the bail? I can give it back to you. Hijichu looked at his watch nonchalantly. Your case is already scheduled. If there are no accidents, it will be in court tomorrow. Get ready. Go eat and shower first, then tell me everything. Yi Xian quickly agreed. 20 minutes later, Yi Xian arrived at Hijichu's room and knocked on the door. The door opened and Smith poked his head out. Come in. Yi Xian nodded to Smith. I'm lawyer He's assistant. You can call me Smith. Smith extended his hand to him with a friendly smile. Yi Xian shook hands with him before sitting down in front of Hijichu. Hijichu asked Smith to sit down as well and turned on the recording button on his phone. He raised his chin at Yi Xian and said one simple word, speak. Yi Xian recalled what had happened over the past few days and felt his mouth go dry. He licked his lips and carefully thought about what had happened before and after. He told Hijichu and Smith in chronological order. I learned Mr. Vanderbilt's address from Gu Yanran, so I wanted to find him and ask if Uncle Gu had left a will with him. I observed him for a few days and felt that it was about time before I went to test him. I didn't expect him to be so vigilant and not reveal anything. I tried for 2 or 3 days and he was finally about to give in. Then something happened. Yi Xian's fingers felt a bit itchy as he looked up at Hijichu. Do you have a cigarette? Hijichu didn't smoke in the past, but he gradually started to smoke in order to find Gunyenji. He took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and tossed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian took it and looked at it. His heart skipped a beat. This cigarette was a bit longer than normal cigarettes. It was completely white, and the tobacco had a faint fragrance. After smoking, it tasted very refreshing, unlike other cigarettes that smelled bad after smoking. This kind of cigarette had another name. He only learned it after coming to the Wuxia Empire. It was called Special Supply Cigarettes. After Gu Yanran had gotten close to Prime Minister Tan, she had once gotten him a pack of Special Supply cigarettes. She had even proudly told him that this kind of cigarette couldn't be bought with money and that he had smoked it once. Yi Xian calmly took out a cigarette from the pack and tossed the rest back to Hijichu. He lit it and took a deep puff. The smell was indescribably strong and even better than the Special Supply cigarettes Gu Yanran had given him. Hijichu also took out a cigarette from the pack and looked down to light it. He took a deep puff and indicated for Yi Xian to continue. Smith didn't smoke, but he couldn't stand the two of them. He pointed at the smoke alarm on the ceiling. Gentlemen, be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, the smoke alarm started ringing like crazy. Hijichu stood up and said to Yi Xian, let's talk outside. Yi Xian quickly followed him to the balcony. The two of them stood under the November sun in Utah in the United States and began talking about the Vanderbilt case. You're saying that when you left the street where the Vanderbilt lived that day, your car had a problem on the way. You fixed it for a few hours and only returned to the hotel in the middle of the night? Hijichu looked thoughtful. Then you mean that you didn't have any witnesses to prove that you were fixing your car on the road during that time? Yi Xian shook his head with a wry smile. They schemed to frame me, so of course they considered all of this. Yeah, and then? You only returned to the hotel in the middle of the night to sleep, and then something happened to the Vanderbilt family during that time? I should say that something had already happened to his family before I returned to the hotel, but no one knew about it at first. Later, after the other party set the fire got bigger and was discovered. Yi Xian had investigated the street where the Vanderbilts lived for a few days, so he was very familiar with the area. The Vanderbilt house is very remote? Hijichu turned on the tablet in his hand to check the location. Yes, their mansion is by the lake, so it's quite a distance from the other houses on that street. Yi Xian gestured to Hijichu. If the fire started in the early morning, most people would be sleeping, so not many people would have discovered it. Hijichu nodded. The timeline all matched up, but the only troublesome thing was that Yi Xian didn't have any witnesses for a few hours that day. But this wasn't a particularly suspicious point. As long as he really didn't do it, the other party wouldn't have direct evidence that Yi Xian appeared at the scene of the fire. It was very difficult to convict someone without direct evidence in the American judicial system, which emphasized juries. The function of reasoning in court was not to be used as a direct basis to convict someone, but to provide logical clues to the chain of evidence. In Yi Xian's case, the chain of evidence was seriously lacking, so it was completely insufficient for the sheriff of Little Rock Canyon to use this to convict Yi Xian. Gu Nianji had probably thought of this as well, but in order for Yi Xian to return safely, she would rather use extradition than acquittal. Although the latter was easier, the latter was also more dangerous. Hijichu knew that if the people behind this were the ones he suspected, then their methods weren't something the Wuxia Imperial Special Police could handle. They would probably have to mobilize the regular army to be a match for those people. Hijichu held a cigarette in his mouth as he stared blankly at the red Rocky Mountains in front of the hotel. His expression was like an ice sculpture. At this moment his cell phone suddenly rang. Hijichu saw that it was Gu Nianji's number, so he answered it with his Bluetooth headset. As soon as the call connected, she quickly greeted him and asked about his progress. After Hijichu answered them one by one, Gu Nianji stammered for a long time before finally getting to the point. Professor Yi Xian's case is currently being hyped up on social media. They even said that our country wants to extradite Yi Xian back to the Wuxia Empire. Gu Nianji paused before saying, I was curious, so I went to investigate who started this topic. After following a few marketing accounts, I found out that Gu Yanran was the one paying the behind-the-scenes money. This was the second update, and the monthly votes had arrived at 7,300 plus updates. Today is the third update, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Where are the recommendation votes from your friends? You have to vote for all of them. Oh, for all for all. Oh. The third update was at 7 p.m. Chapter 833. When Hijichu heard this, he only grunted to indicate that he understood. Gu Nianji was still worried and wanted to warn Hijichu, but she was afraid of hurting his self-esteem. After thinking about it, she still said, Professor He, you have to be careful. I think Gu Yanran's actions are a bit unusual. What do you mean? Just say it. Hijichu noticed Gu Nianji was speaking carefully to him. His face was expressionless as he lowered his head to take a deep drag on his cigarette. Yi Xian studied Hijichu and noticed there was an indescribable softness on his face when he answered the call. Although he looked expressionless, his aura was different. Gu Nianji saw that Hijichu didn't mind, so she quickly said, the topic she started is a bit strange. It's like she's writing an explanation. What time, where, what happened, and what's going on. She's just short of shouting and asking someone to go somewhere. Hijichu narrowed his eyes and smiled darkly. Your intuition is good. She's probably looking for help. Gu Nianji felt like her worst imagination had come true, and her face fell. Then Professor He, will you be in danger? I'm fine. Hijichu's heart warmed and his cold voice seemed to warm up. You haven't told anyone that I'm in the United States, right? Gu Nianji quickly said, not yet. The court is still communicating with the police headquarters, and the police headquarters is waiting for news from the United States. So as long as the United States refuses to cooperate, The police headquarters can't do anything for the time being. They won't send special forces to the United States to extradite Yi Xian. That's good. Keep it a secret for as long as possible and my side will be safer. Yi Xian has already been released on bail and will be in court soon. He Jichu said it very simply, but Gu Nianji understood. Okay, Professor He. Then you and Yi Xian have to be careful. Gu Nianji's mood instantly improved when she heard that Yi Xian had already been released on bail. You have to be careful too. He Jichu reminded her. Keep the phone I gave you with you at all times. Got it? I bring it with me every day. Gu Nianji quickly took out the phone He Jichu gave her and waved it. He Jichu couldn't see it, but he could imagine Gu Nianji's movements. The corners of his lips curled up almost imperceptibly. After hanging up, He Jichu's mood was much better. He raised his hand to throw the unfinished cigarette into the trash can and said to Yi Xian, "Okay, go rest and get ready for court." Yi Xian glanced at him, threw his cigarette away and turned to leave. He Jichu stood alone on the balcony and stared at the brownish-red mountains in the distance, lost in thought for a while. He took out his phone and called the Utah Supreme Court. The Utah Superior Court, also known as the Circuit Court, would come to Little Rock to hear the case after it was scheduled. I want to apply for privacy protection for Yi Xian's case. I don't want the Little Rock Canyon Police Department or any other government agency to release any information related to the interrogation to the media. This was an absolutely reasonable request, and the court actually did not like media exposure. Ever since the Vanderbilt family's case came out, the police station in Little Rock Canyon, especially the police chief, treated themselves as people from the entertainment circle. They wished they could hold press conferences every day. In reality, He Jichu's request came at the right time. When the court order was delivered to the Little Rock Canyon Police Department, the police chief was planning to hold another press conference. At the conference he would lash out at those vampire-like bad lawyers, especially scum like He Jichu. The court order made the police chief break out in a cold sweat. What were they trying to do? Were they trying to restrict freedom of speech? However, the police chief only dared to criticize silently and did not dare to openly violate the order. Moreover, He Jichu was invoking the Human Rights Protection Act of the U.S. Constitution and using privacy protection as an excuse. If he dared to violate this request and the media exposed it, he would really not be able to receive his pension. The scheduled press conference was cancelled just like that. The angry police chief was just about to give himself a vacation when he received a call from the city government. "Mr. Police Chief, an important person will be visiting OV Air Force Base tomorrow. Please arrange for personnel to do the security work." "Yes, Mr. Mayor." The police chief quickly stood up with the phone and was very respectful. "May I ask who this important person is?" "It's said that for the sake of confidentiality no one knows yet. Mr. Police Chief, you just need to do your job well. Someone has already complained that you used too much taxpayer money to hold a press conference. Mr. Police Chief, you are the police chief, not someone from the entertainment industry." The police chief's face couldn't be any redder, and his dark, flushed face looked very awkward. He put down the phone and couldn't be bothered with Yi Xian's case for now. Anyway, it had already been handed over to the court, and whether or not he could be convicted depended on the city's prosecutor. At night, He Jichu had just finished showering and was holding a glass of red wine in the living room of his hotel suite, slowly savoring it. At that moment, someone rang the doorbell. He Jichu stood up and walked to the door to look through the peephole on the door. He saw that Little A had arrived. There was no one else in the hallway except for Little A. He Jichu opened the door to let him in. Little A carried a small suitcase and threw himself onto He Jichu's sofa as soon as he entered. He howled, "Mr. He, your request this time is too much. I can't satisfy it." "Then get lost." He Jichu left the living room without looking back. He didn't even look at Little A once. Little A was only bluffing to get He Jichu to add some money, but he didn't expect He Jichu to directly ask him to leave. He awkwardly crawled up from the sofa and followed He Jichu to the bar. He made himself a tequila cocktail and presented it to He Jichu with a smile. "Mr. He, try the tequila I made. I haven't made a drink for Mr. He in a long time." He Jichu didn't move. His shimmering, sultry eyes turned to look at him from the corner of his eyes. "What nonsense are you talking about? What I want must be in place by tomorrow. If you can't do it, then get lost the way you came." "Mr. He, you don't know, do you? This matter is really more difficult than just the average kind." Little A assumed the posture of a long conversation and said earnestly, "If it were any other time, it wouldn't be a big deal if it was a little difficult. What's so great about the Air Force Base? Us brothers can't compare to them investigating when we risk our lives. Get to the point. Hijichu took a sip of the tequila little A made for him. His eyes slanted, and his gaze was as sharp as a knife. He shook off his usual elegance and modesty, leaving only a body full of murderous intent and hostility. So I really can't hide anything from you. The point is, we just received news that the commander of the Pacific Fleet, Mr. Laris, will be visiting OV Air Force Base tomorrow. The security here in Little Rock Canyon has been increased by 3 levels. It's now the highest level. Little A spread his hands. Look, isn't it even more difficult for us? The commander of the Pacific Fleet, Laris? Hijichu's brows furrowed. That Japanese American? Yes, that's him. Little A chuckled. This guy still has some skills. The Pacific Fleet is based at Pearl Harbor. Everyone knows what Japan once did to Pearl Harbor. To allow a Japanese American to be the commander of the Pacific Fleet based at Pearl Harbor, the Americans were really extraordinarily ambitious. The commander of the Pacific Fleet is the commander of the Navy. What is he doing at OV Air Force Base? Hijichu took out his phone and searched the news, but there were no reports yet. Laris's arrival was rather sudden, Little A explained to Hijichu. We received the news through special channels. Because of your commission, we had to do a lot of preparatory work, including intelligence gathering like this. Hijichu nodded. It's a bit difficult, but I believe that with Little A's position and ability at the top of the Whitewater Security Company, you should be able to take proper security measures for your own clients. Little A was elated by Hijichu's praise and proudly puffed out his chest. Mr. He, you really have good taste. I really did do that. Before coming here, I applied for a wartime weapon permit from the Little Rock Canyon municipal government to protect the safety of my clients. Mr. He, your status is no less than that of the commander of the Pacific Fleet. We also gave you the highest level of security. Little A flattered Hijichu from all angles. Hijichu took out a cigarette, lit it and took a drag. He slowly blew out a smoke ring. Did you bring the thing I asked you to bring? I brought it. Otherwise, why would I personally make a trip here? Was it really to mix drinks for you? Little A laughed at himself and pointed to the living room. It's in that small suitcase. You took it out from the bank safe? Yes, your serial number and returning it to Hijichu. What do you want to do with this thing? Hijichu was suddenly interested and nodded at Little A. Do you want to see it? Of course. Little A was very interested in weapons. The thing Hijichu asked him to bring was a pile of components of all shapes and sizes. They were placed in a bank safe and were rented at exorbitant prices every year. Little A didn't believe these were just normal components. Hijichu walked to the living room and opened the small suitcase Little A brought. He poured out the separated components in transparent bags. This is the 3rd update. Today is the 3rd update. I'm asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Where are the recommendation votes from my dear friends? You have to vote all of them. All for all. Oh. Good night, dear friends. Chapter 834. Mr. He, do you need tools? Little A stretched his neck and peeked over Hijichu's back. He could tell that Hijichu was about to assemble something. Maybe it was a gun? Or a computer? Hijichu didn't make a sound. His slender and clean fingers skillfully picked up the various parts and quickly assembled them. He didn't use any tools, nor did he need any blueprints to refer to. It was as if this thing was already imprinted in his mind and flowed from his fingertips with great familiarity. All the parts of this thing worked together seamlessly, just like the furniture in the ancient legends of the Wuxia Empire that didn't use nails. Its structure was self-contained, and all the parts were designed using the best principles of mechanics. In less than a minute there was a soft click. Hijichu's left thumb pressed down and a strange-looking gun appeared. It looked like an anti-material rifle with half of its body cut off, but the diameter of the barrel and scope were even larger than the anti-material rifle. Little A was a weapons fanatic, so his eyes almost popped out when he saw this strange-looking gun. His face instantly flushed with blood and his breathing quickened. He could even hear the gurgling sound of blood rushing against his eardrums. This was the covetous gaze of a glutton who saw supreme delicacies, or a playboy who saw a peerless beauty. Hijichu turned around to glance at him and single-handedly tossed the newly assembled gun to Little A. See for yourself. Little A's hands trembled as he caught the gun Hijichu tossed over. He turned it over and over as he measured it with his hands while muttering, "It's 60 centimeters long, weighs about 5 kilograms, has a caliber of 40 millimeters, and the scope on it," as Little A spoke, He couldn't help raising the gun and resting it on the crook of his arm. He squinted his left eye and looked at the scope that was the size of a magazine. WTF? Is this a scope? This is clearly a small smart computer? Little A excitedly raised the gun and ran around the room. A scope that combines a laser rangefinder and a smart computer. This is an XM-40 grenade launcher. Where did you get it? The U.S. military's weapons laboratory has only just begun experimenting with the XM-25 grenade launcher. How did you get an XM-40 grenade launcher? I feel like I can go to heaven. He raised the gun and really ran around the room laughing like a child. It was impossible to tell that this person was the leader of the Whitewater Security Company operation team with the most kills equals. Hijichu put one hand in his trouser pocket, his eyes following the gun as he said coolly, "This is the XM-40 CDD system. We call it the Single Soldier Semi-Automatic Magnetic Storm System, or the XM-40 Magnetic Storm Grenade Gun. Give it to me." Hijichu spread his hands at Little A. "Give it to me." Little A hugged his gun tightly, took a step back and shook his head firmly. "No. You can't do it here. It's just for show. It's not like we're going to shoot. What are you afraid of?" Hijichu snickered and walked to Little A's side. He pushed and pulled with one hand and somehow the gun returned from Little A's hand to Hijichu's. Little A looked at and looked to. Then looked at to Little A to he to Little. Hijichu didn't look at him. He propped up the gun with one hand and stuffed a box of bullets into it with the other. He raised the gun and aimed in the direction of the door. Little A felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. It was as if some unknown beast was staring at his vitals. He couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. Hijichu raised the gun and looked through the scope at Little A's heart. He moved the mouse button on the scope, and the pointer began to automatically search for a target with vital signs according to the principle of thermal imaging. Little A's holographic image gradually appeared in the cross-shaped field of view of the scope. He could see the shape of Little A's heart as well as all the bones and blood in his entire body, all at a glance through the scope. This gun, in addition to its lethality comparable to a small laser cannon, can paralyze all electromagnetic and radio shortwave communication systems within 10 miles with one shot. It especially has the ability to block counterfactual quantum communication. Hijichu's voice was cold and indifferent, and his shimmering almond-shaped eyes revealed a cold expression. He was very cold-blooded. After Little A heard this, his heart crumbled. He boasted that he was a weapons expert from the Whitewater Company, but he had never seen or heard of Hijichu's gun before. One shot could paralyze all electromagnetic and radio shortwave communication systems within 10 miles. In other words, it could also interfere with all network signals. Simply put, one shot could cut off the network in power. Also, what the hell was counterfactual quantum communication? This was clearly something that was still in the theoretical stage of the laboratory. It hadn't even been built yet, but Hijichu actually had a weapon that could block it. Little A's eyes uncontrollably revealed a hint of greed. Hijichu turned around to look at him and said coldly, "Don't even think about it. This isn't something you can have any ideas about." Little A wiped his face and pounced over shamelessly. He grabbed Hijichu's arm and half knelt on the ground on one leg to beg. "Mr. He, I won't have any ideas about this gun of yours, but you have to give me a low-spec version of this gun." He understood that he couldn't afford and didn't dare to ask for such a high-spec model. If Hijichu really gave him one, he would either have to give it to the company or flee to the end of the world, so he only wanted a low-spec version of the XM system to satisfy his cravings. Hijichu saw that Hua Xiaoheng was tactful and nodded. He took out a dusting cloth from his bag and carefully wiped the barrel and scope. He said expressionlessly, "As long as you can help me complete this task, I'll give you 2 low-spec versions of the XM-25 CDT system and 100 magnetic storm bullets." It's a deal. Little A was completely in awe of Hijichu now. In order to achieve his goal, Hijichu understood very well what it meant to cater to someone's fancy. For someone like Little A, money alone wasn't enough to make him work for him wholeheartedly. Putting away the gun, Little A's attitude was much more proper. Not only did he actively analyze the terrain and propose many countermeasures, but he also took the initiative to immediately deploy everything that day. Hijichu sat down with one hand on the XM-40 and said leisurely, "You only have one night. Tomorrow morning this place will definitely be under martial law. Don't worry, I'll definitely have all the weapons in place before martial law begins tomorrow." Although Little A was talking to Hijichu, his eyes never left the gun in Hijichu's hands. Go, I'll wait for your good news. Hijichu raised a brow and raised the gun to give little A go for it. Little A. How envious, jealous, and hateful. The next morning, Hijichu ate breakfast and dismantled the gun to put it in his briefcase. The gun was made of a very special metal. Its internal structure was close to plastic but not plastic. The existing metal detectors in the United States couldn't detect its existence, so Hijichu could bring it anywhere he wanted, including to court. The security measures in the United States were very strict. Not only did people have to go through a metal detector inspection, but even their phones had to be stored separately in a cabinet outside the court and couldn't be brought inside. Early in the morning, Hijichu brought his assistants Smith and Yi Xian, as well as 4 Whitewater Company bodyguards wearing sunglasses to the High Court in Little Rock Canyon. Today, the Utah High Court judge was here to hear Yi Xian's case for arson and murder of the Vanderbilt family. The sheriff, who had personally arrested Yi Xian, appeared in court as a witness for the prosecution. He originally didn't want to come because the municipal government assigned him another security task. But the judge requested that he attend and warned him that if he didn't, the prosecution would be missing an important witness. This could lead to Yi Xian being acquitted on the spot. The sheriff wouldn't be happy if he found out. He had to go. So early that morning, he wore his new police uniform and appeared in high spirits in the witness stand in court. This case would be directly heard by the High Court judge, and because of the urgency of the situation, Hijichu agreed that the court would use a computer to randomly select jurors. They had no objections. If there was enough time, the jurors would usually be selected by the defense's lawyer. But this time was tight and Hijichu didn't care who the jurors were, so it was an emergency. When he sat down in court, Hijichu saw 6 people sitting in the jury seats. 3 were women with curious faces and 3 were men with serious expressions. He turned to look at them and nodded slightly in greeting. His charming peach blossom eyes flashed with a smile, instantly giving people a good impression. Then Yi Xian, wearing a custom-made black Armani suit, sat in the defendant's stand. Dressed in the suit, he was tall and handsome, almost as tall as Hijichu. When the 2 of them stood together, they were like orchids and jade trees. In an instant, they outshone the short and fat prosecutor and the even fatter witness, the sheriff. The female jurors who liked to look at faces immediately tilted the scales in their hearts toward the defendant. The male jurors who were disdainful immediately drew a big X next to Yi Xian's name in their minds. The judge was already used to the turbulent undercurrents among the jurors. He banged the gavel and announced the start of the court. First, the prosecutor began to question the witnesses. The witnesses he called were the Vanderbilt family's housekeeper, cook, and a neighbor on the Vanderbilt family's block. The last witness was the sheriff. "Mr. Housekeeper, may I ask if you know the person who set the house on fire that day?" The prosecutor went straight to the point and didn't hide his intentions. Hijichu immediately raised his hand. Objection. The prosecutor is using misleading statements to cause undue influence on my client. Objection sustained. The judge's face darkened as he looked at the prosecutor who was about to retire. Please pay attention to your words and actions. The prosecutor didn't back down at all and said loudly to the judge, "This is the witness's testimony. I am merely repeating the witness's testimony." Mr. Prosecutor, you are a prosecutor, not a phonograph. If repeating the witness's testimony can determine a case, then why do we need judges? Why do we need jurors? Why do we need your brain? Hijichu didn't hesitate to mock him. Objection. The defendant's lawyer is slandering me. The prosecutor who was about to retire became even more agitated. Because they knew Hijichu would be Yi Xian's defense lawyer, almost no one in the Little Rock Canyon Judicial Department was willing to be the prosecutor for this case because they felt they couldn't afford to offend or win. In the end, the case was pushed to a prosecutor who was about to retire because he was about to retire anyway. Even if he offended Hijichu and lost the case, it didn't matter. The government's pension wouldn't be affected because of this, and his career was also over, so it didn't matter if it was affected or not. I am stating the facts. If you don't accept it, I won't take it back. Hijichu's attitude was very firm. Please don't dwell on the details, Mr. Prosecutor. Your personal dignity is not as important as this case. The Vanderbilt family's spirits in heaven are waiting for you to find the real murderer and clear their names. This was the first update. Today there were 2 updates, asking for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Where are the recommendation votes from my friends? You have to vote for all of them. 7 p.m. the second update. P.S. Thank you to my leader Light Smile Like Gauze for the spiritual pet fate egg, 100,000 Chidian dollars, yesterday. Thank you to Xianyuan Yushin for the Heshibi, 10,000 Chidian dollars, yesterday. Mwah. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.